Chapter 271. All the monarchs who entered the 5 elemental Tao Palace finally gathered in one place. Moreover, everyone's strength had greatly increased, so they were naturally ecstatic. On the same day, they gathered in this half-step Ghost King's tribe and drank to their heart's content. It was a rare occasion. In the history of the 5 elemental Tao Palace, there had never been a time when humans could sweep through the entire 5 elemental Tao Palace. But this time, under the leadership of Shao Chun and the others, the humans did it. Everywhere they went, the ghost-reading tribes were destroyed. The 10 great geniuses sat together in a circle, and after they finished drinking their cups, Huang Fu Ao laughed in a clear voice. "Haha, how refreshing! Everyone, let's set out together tomorrow and annihilate the remaining 3 Ghost King tribes as well as those fishes that escaped the net." 2 of the 5 ghostly monarchs had already been killed by the 10 geniuses, so only 3 remained. No one objected to Huang Fu Ao's words. As long as the 3 ghostly monarchs' tribes were annihilated, their trip to the 5 elemental Tao Palace would be considered complete. Just as everyone was preparing to attack the 3 ghostly monarch tribes, the remaining 3 ghostly monarchs of the 5 elemental Tao Palace had gathered in one of the ghostly monarch tribes called Chongshan. The 3 ghost kings sat together in a huge wooden house that resembled a palace. The one in the middle was naturally the host, Chongshan Ghost King. On his left was 100 Trees Ghost King, and on his right was Rock Ghost King. The remaining 3 ghost kings gathered together. At this moment, their expressions didn't look too good. They seemed to be a bit gloomy. Chongshan Ghost King looked at 100 Trees Ghost King and Rock Ghost King and said in a deep voice, "The humans who entered the 5 elemental Tao Palace this time far exceeded our expectations. Even Batu's group has been killed. The overall strength of the humans this time is unprecedented, so I think we should work together. Otherwise, we'll be defeated one by the humans." They already knew that Batu's group had been killed by the humans. These were 2 ghost kings, existences on par with them, but now they were killed by the humans. Ever since the opening of the 5 elemental Tao Palace, they had never heard of a human killing a ghost king. After all, a ghost king was equivalent to a human Tao querying expert. The humans who entered the 5 elemental Tao Palace never exceeded the celestial realm. Moreover, humans couldn't break through to the Tao querying realm in the 5 elemental Tao Palace. It was precisely because of the absolute suppression of realms that no human had ever killed a ghost king. This meant that one had to surpass a realm in order to kill a ghost king. Even peerless geniuses couldn't do such a thing. This time, it was also because of the existence of the 10 great geniuses. Moreover, they had to work together to kill a ghost king. However, this was still shocking enough. Hearing Chongshan Ghost King's words, 100 Trees Ghost King and Rock Ghost King pondered for a moment and agreed without much hesitation. In fact, they didn't have any other choice. If they didn't work together, they would die without a doubt. Since the humans had the strength to kill a ghost king, how could they let them go? Therefore, they had to work together. The 3 ghost kings who had been in the 5 elemental Tao Palace for hundreds of years were forced to work together to fight against the humans. This made the 3 ghost kings who had been in the 5 elemental Tao Palace for hundreds of years extremely depressed. At the same time, they were also very confused. How could the humans who entered the 5 elemental Tao Palace this time be so powerful? They were on a completely different level from the previous humans. After choosing to work together, Chongshan Ghost King said seriously, "If that's the case, then the 2 of you should immediately gather all the experts in your tribes. With the combined strength of our 3 tribes, I don't believe that we can't stop these damned humans." Chongshan Ghost King no longer thought about killing humans. Now, he only had one thought, and that was to survive the last few days. He knew that the humans of the heavenly Qin continent couldn't stay in the 5 elemental Tao Palace for long. Once the 3 months were up, they would be forcefully sent out. Therefore, as long as the 3 tribes could survive the last few days, the humans would leave on their own. The situation had taken a 360-degree turn. As a Ghost King tribe, every time the 5 elemental Tao Palace opened, they would play the role of hunters. That was because the humans before didn't have the strength to resist the Ghost King tribe. Faced with the Ghost King tribe's pursuit, they could only flee. But this time, the situation had been completely reversed. The Ghost King tribe, who had been playing the role of the hunter, had become the prey this time. And the humans, who had always been playing the role of the prey, had become the hunter this time. This made the 3 Ghost King tribes tremble in fear. They no longer dared to think about killing humans. They only hoped that the 3 months would come quickly so that they could send this group of abnormally strong humans out. With heavy expressions, the 3 Ghost Kings clearly didn't expect that when they decided to form an alliance, Shao Chun and the other 10 prides also decided to attack the 3 tribes. Now that the large ghost reading tribes in the 5 elemental Tao Palace had been wiped out by the humans, only the 3 Ghost King tribes were left. How could Shao Chun and the others let these 3 fat pigs go? According to the agreement, the 100 Trees Ghost King and the Rock Ghost King moved all the ghost reading tribes to the Chongshan tribe. In a short time, the number of ghost reading tribes in the Chongshan tribe had reached tens of thousands. Among them, the number of ghost reading tribes under the Earth Mirror realm was the highest, reaching tens of thousands. There were also more than 500 heavenly ghosts. Behind them were the 3 Ghost Kings. With such a force gathered together, it could definitely be said to be the strongest force in the history of the 5 elemental Tao Palace. If it was any other time the 5 elemental Tao Palace opened, this force would be enough to sweep through all the humans. However, even with such a powerful force gathered together, the 3 Ghost Kings still felt uncertain. There was nothing they could do about it. The humans this time were already ridiculously strong. The next day after the 3 Ghost Kings formed an alliance, Shao Chun and the others also received the news. One of the geniuses who went out to investigate the situation learned that the 3 Ghost Kings had formed an alliance. He immediately told Shao Chun and the others the news. Fellow prides, this is how it is. The 3 Ghost King tribes have completely formed an alliance, the Heavens Pride respectfully reported to the 10 prides before him. Chapter 272. After learning about the alliance of the 3 Ghost King tribes from the Sky Pride, the Burning Spear Pride King Huangfu Ao spoke first. Alliance? Let's wipe them out in one go. Huangfu Ao wasn't too concerned about the alliance of the 3 Ghost King tribes. Instead, he thought it was a good thing that they could wipe them out in one go. Hearing Huangfu Ao's words, Ouyang Roshua said plainly, 3 Ghost Kings, a few hundred heavenly ghosts, and countless mind ghosts below the Earth Mirror? Wipe them out in one go. Be careful that we don't get wiped out in one go. The combined strength of the 3 Ghost King tribes was indeed not to be underestimated. Even though everyone's strength had improved tremendously, there were still too few of them. There were only a little over 100 of them in total. There was still a huge gap between 100 people and tens of thousands of spirit-reading ghosts, with 3 spirit lords among them. Putting everything else aside, just the 3 spirit lords alone would require Shao Chun and the rest of the group to work together to kill them. Once Shao Chun and the rest went to deal with the 3 Ghost Kings, the remaining hundreds of heavenly ghosts and tens of thousands of mind ghosts would need the Sky Prides to deal with. Against such a large number of mind ghosts and heavenly ghosts, it was unknown how long the Sky Prides could last. Just as Ouyang Roshua finished speaking, the Divine Sound Pride King Gu Mu nodded in agreement. Fairy Shui is right. There are too many of them. If we fight them head-on, we won't be in too much danger. However, it's hard to say for the rest. Once we're surrounded, it's possible that we'll all be wiped out. If they fought the 3 Ghost King tribes head-on, the 10 Sky Prides were confident that they could survive. Even if they couldn't win, they could still escape. However, what about the Sky Prides? They weren't like Shao Chun and the rest. Once they were surrounded, it would be difficult for them to escape. Furthermore, if they really had to retreat, Xiao Chun and the rest could only bring a limited number of people with them. Hence, a head-on fight was unlikely. The most important question now is how long the Sky Prides below can last, and whether we can successfully kill the 3 Ghost Kings within this period of time. As long as we can kill the 3 Ghost Kings within this period of time, we can go back to support the Sky Prides below. We may not lose this battle. After hearing Gu Mu's words, Guduwia spoke. Brother Gudu, we understand what you're saying. However, based on the current situation, the Sky Prides below will be defeated before we kill the 3 Ghost Kings. There are too many Mind Ghosts. After Guduwia finished speaking, the Thunder Pride Wang Lan said arrogantly. The most important question now was how long the Sky Prides below could last, and whether this period of time was enough for Xiao Chen and the other 10 Sky Prides to kill the 3 Ghost Kings. As long as the Sky Prides could last long enough, Xiao Chen and the rest would have enough time to kill the 3 Ghost Kings. Then, they could still fight. Otherwise, before Xiao Chen and the rest could kill the 3 Ghost Kings, the Sky Prides below would all be dead. This was where the problem lay. However, based on the current situation, the Sky Prides could at most last for 15 minutes against so many Mind Ghosts and Sky Ghosts. 15 minutes was clearly not enough time for Xiao Chen and the rest to kill the 3 Ghost Kings. One had to know that Ghost Kings weren't that easy to kill. Moreover, they had to face 3 of them at the same time. If they were going to fight this battle, they had to think of a way to make the Sky Prides last longer. Only then would they have a chance of winning. Everyone pointed out the crux of this battle. However, the Sky Prides were once again in a dilemma as to how to make the Sky Prides last longer. No matter how much they thought about it, they still couldn't come up with a good idea. In the end, Xiao Chen spoke up. Actually, it's not like there's no way. Xiao Chen said slowly. Everyone looked at Xiao Chen when they heard that. Huang Fuao even urged, Brother Xiao, do you have a way? Hurry up and tell us. Xiao Chen had a way to make the Sky Prides last longer. Everyone looked at Xiao Chen expectantly when they heard that, waiting for him to continue. Xiao Chen said calmly in the face of everyone's gazes. Actually, the only way to make the Sky Prides last longer is to increase their battle prowess. However, the only way to increase a person's battle prowess in a short period of time is through pills and talismans. Pills and talismans? Everyone quickly reacted when they heard Xiao Chen's words. Xiao Chen smiled and said, the method is simple. Can Fairy Shui refine a pill that can increase battle prowess in a short period of time? There are some side effects, so long as it doesn't damage one's foundation. However, there's a requirement. The pill's effects must be guaranteed to last for 2 hours. Xiao Chen asked as he looked at Ouyang Roshua. Ouyang Roshua pondered for a moment before nodding. I know a pill called the Bloodline Pill. It can increase a cultivator's battle prowess for a short period of time. Its effects can also be guaranteed to last for 2 hours without damaging one's foundation. Ouyang Roshua had a method. Xiao Chen looked at Lan Xiao when he heard that. As one of the Sky Prides of the Divine Talisman sect, Lan Xiao was naturally a talisman master. Furthermore, he was a heavenly talisman master. Brother Lan, Fairy Shui has already taken care of the pill. I'll have to trouble you with the talismans, Xiao Chen said with a smile as he looked at Lan Xiao. Xiao Chen's method was simple. With Ouyang Roshua's bloodline pill and Lan Xiao's talismans, the Sky Pride's battle prowess would definitely increase significantly in a short period of time. There was no need to talk about the effects of the pill. After swallowing it, one's battle prowess would instantly increase. Although there would be side effects, as long as it didn't damage one's foundation, everyone could still bear the cost. As for the talismans, it was even simpler. The Sky Prides could directly use them to attack. With enough talismans in hand, the Sky Pride's battle prowess could be greatly increased. After hearing Xiao Chen's plan, everyone expressed their approval. This was the only feasible method at the moment. After this, the Sky Prides should be able to last for over an hour. An hour should be enough for Xiao Chen's group to kill the 3 Ghost Kings. Moreover, Ouyang Roshua's bloodline pill could last for around 2 hours. In other words, after Xiao Chen's group killed the 3 Ghost Kings, the Sky Prides would still be able to fight for another hour. This way, it would be more than enough time to annihilate the 3 Ghost King tribes Nian Ghosts and Heavenly Ghosts. Everyone agreed with Xiao Chen's method. In the end, Xiao Chen smiled faintly. A glint of battle intent flashed through his eyes. He looked at the Sky Prides and said, "This is the final battle. If we win, we'll be able to decide the outcome of this battle. This trip to the 5 Elemental Dao Palace will truly be complete. We'll also have enough Dao seeds to break through to the Great Circle of the Heaven Realm." Chapter 273. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard Xiao Chen's words. At the same time, Xiao Chen began to assign tasks to the 3 Ghost Kings. Mu He, Lin Nua, Huanggu, and Gu Mu would deal with the 100 Trees Ghost King. Lan Xiao, Feng Lingye, Ouyang Roshua, and Huang Fu Ao would deal with the Rock Ghost King. As for the Chongshan Ghost King, Xiao Chen and Gudu Wuyao would deal with him. The reason for this assignment was to kill the 3 Ghost Kings in the shortest amount of time. Xiao Chen and Gudu Wuyao were the strongest among the 10 Ghost Kings. They should be able to defeat the Chongshan Ghost King if they work together. As for the other 8, they had to kill the other 2 Ghost Kings in the shortest amount of time. Nobody objected to Xiao Chen's arrangement. Xiao Chen then told them to get ready. Ouyang Roshua and Lan Xiao had the most important task. One of them had to make Dan beads, while the other had to make talismans. Without realizing it, Xiao Chen had gradually become the leader of the 10 Ghost Kings. Nobody objected to Xiao Chen's orders. Perhaps even the 10 Ghost Kings themselves didn't realize it. They began to prepare for the final battle. In the next few days, Ouyang Roshua and Lan Xiao were the busiest. Ouyang Roshua had it easier because she had Xiao Chen to help her. After all, Xiao Chen was the disciple of the Pill Cloud Dominator. He had also learned Dan beads. Although he wasn't as good as Ouyang Roshua, he could still help her. As for Lan Xiao, he was the only talisman master among the 10 Ghost Kings. He had no choice but to ask several divine talisman sect disciples to help him. It relieved some of the pressure on him. They worked day and night without rest. After 3 days of preparation, Ouyang Roshua and Lan Xiao finally met Xiao Chen's requirements. Each prodigy was given a bloodline pill and 10 talismans. 8 of them were offensive talismans and 2 were defensive talismans. With the pills and talismans, the preparations were finally done. After resting for a day, everyone adjusted themselves to their peak condition. Then, under the lead of Xiao Chen and the other 10 great geniuses, they headed to the Great Mountain Tribe. They had always sent people to monitor the Heavy Mountain Tribe and knew that the 3 Ghost King tribes had gathered there. Along the way, everyone was ready for the final battle. They knew that this would be the most difficult battle they had faced since entering the Dao Palace. Soon, they arrived at a place not far from the Great Mountain Tribe. Xiao Chen looked at the supreme talents behind him and said, "Everyone, I won't say anything unnecessary. I hope you can use all your strength in this final battle and destroy the 3 Ghost King tribes in one go." Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone shouted in unison, "Kill!" Their battle intent was awe-inspiring. Everyone was filled with fighting spirit. For this battle, Xiao Chen and the other 10 great geniuses had made a lot of preparations. They had already prepared elixirs and talismans for everyone. Seeing that the supreme talents were so eager to fight, Xiao Chen smiled and looked at Huang Fu Ao and the other 7 great geniuses. The 8 of them were in charge of dealing with the Rock Fall Ghost King and the 100 Trees Ghost King. Their task was also very important. The key to this battle is to kill the Ghost King as soon as possible. Everyone, don't hold back. Xiao Chen smiled and said to Huang Fu Ao and the other 7 great geniuses. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Lan Xiao smiled and said, "Don't worry. Why don't we compete and see who kills the Ghost King first?" Okay. Let's make it clear first. Whoever kills the Ghost King last will have to treat us to a drink when we return to the heavenly Chen continent. Ha ha! Huang Fu Ao laughed heartily. As they laughed, the 10 great geniuses' battle intent soared to the sky. Then, Xiao Chen shouted in a low voice, "Everyone, we must win this battle. Kill!" With a light shout, the people who were already filled with fighting spirit immediately charged toward the Great Mountain Tribe. Seeing the humans charging toward them, the Great Mountain Tribe, who had been on high alert, reacted immediately. The war drums thundered, and the spirit-reading ghosts who were in charge of guarding the tribe shouted loudly. The heavy sound of war drums reverberated around the Chongshan tribe. At the same time, an army of tens of thousands of spirit-reading ghosts poured out of the Chongshan tribe like a flood. From a distance, it looked like a black mass. Moreover, there were hundreds of heavenly ghosts commanding the spirit-reading army. In the face of such a large army of Nian ghosts, the geniuses did not hesitate at all. They immediately swallowed the bloodline elixir in their hands, and their auras soared. Ouyang Roshua's alchemy skills were indeed extraordinary. She had already surpassed many of the older alchemists. It was no wonder. Ouyang Roshua had lived in the Heaven Dan Valley since she was young. She mainly cultivated alchemy. In addition to her talent, her alchemy skills were naturally incomparable to ordinary people. As the elixir entered her stomach, her aura soared. At the same time, a peerless genius shouted coldly, "Release the Thunder Talisman." The Sky Thunder Talisman was a talisman made by Lan Xiao. Hundreds of Sky Thunder Talismans were shot out along with this peerless talent's roar. In an instant, hundreds of lightning bolts struck down from the top of the Niangue army. The Niangue army was in a complete mess. Translator: Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The sudden attack of the talisman threw the Niangue army into disarray. With the help of the Sky Thunder Talisman, the human army of over 100 supreme talents plunged into the Niangue army like a sharp knife. Everyone attack! The Supreme Sky Prides who were leading the group shouted. Without the 10 kings of pride around, they were the most powerful people in the group. Under the leadership of the Supreme Sky Prides, the majority of the elite Sky Prides also shouted angrily. One after another, they drew out their weapons and fought against Niangue. Before the battle, Xiao Chen had already made clear preparations and division of labor. The 10 kings of pride would deal with the 3 ghost kings, the peerless geniuses would deal with the heavenly ghosts, and the top geniuses would target the Nian ghosts who were below the earth mirror. Every level of genius had their own mission. When the battle broke out, everyone followed Xiao Chen's orders. The peerless geniuses blocked the heavenly ghosts in front of them. Each peerless genius had to face at least 10 heavenly ghosts. Evil creature, where do you think you are going? Come back to me. Mu Feng was fighting against 13 heavenly ghosts alone. At this moment, one of the heavenly ghosts sensed Mu Feng's powerful combat strength and didn't want to fight to the death. Instead, it dashed towards a top genius not far away. However, Mu Feng wouldn't agree to it. With a punch, he pulled the Nian ghost back into the battle. Like Mu Feng, the rest of the peerless geniuses did the same. Many of the heavenly ghosts wanted to kill the top geniuses, but they were all blocked by the peerless geniuses. Chapter 274. A fierce battle broke out. Although the Sky Prides were facing a large army of Nian ghouls, they were still able to unleash shocking combat strength. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if these geniuses weren't born in this era, they would all be incomparably dazzling existences. However, they were born at the wrong time. They were born in the same era as the 10 great geniuses, so the brilliance that should have belonged to them was completely overshadowed by the 10 great geniuses. However, this did not mean that the Sky Prides were weak. After going through the trial of the 5 elemental Dao Palace, the team formed by the Sky Prides gradually revealed their ferocious side. After the fierce battle broke out, 3 terrifying auras erupted from the depths of the Heavy Mountain tribe. Then, the 3 Ghost Kings appeared. Seeing this, the 10 great geniuses who had yet to make a move took the initiative to meet them. Their opponents had finally appeared. Haha, everyone, I'll go first. Seeing the 3 Ghost Kings appear, Huang Fu Ao laughed heartily. Then, he took a step forward and charged toward the Rock Fall Ghost King. According to the plan, the 10 great geniuses locked onto their respective target. The 100 Trees Ghost King and the Rock Fall Ghost King were facing the attacks of 4 Sky Prides at the same time. The 2 Ghost Kings' faces darkened. They had heard of the 4 great geniuses' combat strength. The 4 great geniuses were already capable of killing them when they joined forces. They did not expect 4 great geniuses to besiege them. The 100 Trees Ghost King was puzzled. Since the 10 great geniuses had sent 4 great geniuses to besiege him and the Rock Fall Ghost King, what about the Mountain Ghost King? With this thought in mind, the 100 Trees Ghost King turned to look at the battlefield where the Mountain Ghost King was. As expected, there were only 2 great geniuses in front of the Mountain Ghost King. In other words, the 10 great geniuses had placed their focus on him and the Rock Fall Ghost King. As for the Mountain Ghost King, perhaps they were only trying to pin him down. Mountain Ghost King, quickly kill those 2 humans. In 100 Trees Ghost King's mind, he thought that the top 10 Proud King's goal was to kill him and Rock Ghost King first, and then kill Chongshan Ghost King. Just like this time, as long as Chongshan Ghost King killed Shao Chun and Guduwia first, then the plan of the top 10 Proud Kings would be easily foiled. Hearing his words, Mu He and the other 3 who had joined forces to attack sneered, "Do you think our goal is just to stall Chongshan Ghost King? Naive. Let me tell you, the 2 men who besieged Chongshan Ghost King are the most powerful ones among the 10 of us. When they join forces, they have the power to kill the Ghost King. They only sent Shao Chun and Guduwia to deal with Chongshan Ghost King, not to stall him at all, because Shao Chun and Guduwia both had the ability to kill Ghost Kings." Upon hearing Mu He's words, 100 Trees Ghost King's expression changed slightly. However, he did not have much time to think about it as Mu He's group of 4 had already arrived. The battle between the 3 Ghost Kings and the 10 great geniuses had already erupted. There was no need to worry about the 100 Trees Ghost King and the Rock Fall Ghost King. With the combined power of the 8 great geniuses, they could definitely kill the 2 Ghost Kings. The only problem was how long it would take to kill them. Otherwise, the geniuses below might not be able to hold on. Because of the urgency of time, everyone used all their strength to kill the 2 Ghost Kings in the shortest time possible. Just like Mu He's group, Shao Chun and Guduwia were also engaged in a fierce battle with Chongshan Ghost King. In the beginning, Chongshan Ghost King thought he had a great advantage since only 2 great geniuses had come to kill him. However, this thought instantly disappeared after the battle. Shao Chun and Guduwia's strength had greatly exceeded his expectations. He attacked with all his might, unleashing the second layer of the 3-layered waves, 1,000-layered wave. At the same time, Guduwia also unleashed his signature move, the high earth-level martial skill, Red Lotus Sword technique. A fiery red blade slashed towards Chongshan Ghost King rapidly. Shao Chun and Guduwia were publicly recognized as the strongest among the 10 great geniuses. Their combined strength was no weaker than the other 4 great geniuses. As a result, Chongshan Ghost King quickly understood that Shao Chun and Guduwia were not trying to stall him. Instead, they were trying to kill him. The 2 ranked first and second great geniuses were working together to kill him. Faced with Shao Chun's 3-layered waves and Guduwia's Red Lotus Sword technique, Chongshan Ghost King roared furiously. Black chi surged around him as he punched out with both fists at the same time, colliding heavily with their attacks. Chongshan Ghost King successfully blocked Shao Chun and Guduwia's attack. However, this was only the beginning. After the first attack, Shao Chun and Guduwia leaped forward and immediately engaged in a fierce battle with Chongshan Ghost King. Both of them had already reached an extremely profound level in their understanding of swordsmanship. Every sword strike was not only fast and powerful, but the angle of the strike was also extremely tricky. Chongshan Ghost King became more and more alarmed as he fought. He realized that Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya's attacks were like a huge net that was constantly sealing him. It was almost flawless. Once he made the slightest mistake, he would be severely injured by a single strike. According to the plan before the battle, Xiao Qun and the others had to kill the three great geniuses within an hour. Otherwise, the geniuses below would not be able to hold on. Time was running out. Therefore, Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya's attacks were aimed at Chongshan Ghost King's vital point. The attacks were like waves that came one after another. Moreover, the power of the attacks was getting stronger and stronger, and the speed was also getting faster and faster. The sky was filled with sword light. At the same time, the perfection sword chi enveloped Chongshan Ghost King. The sharp sword chi constantly cut open wounds on Chongshan Ghost King's body. Although these wounds were only flesh wounds, they could not be ignored if this went on. He did not expect Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya to be so powerful. He had already tried his best, but he still could not gain any advantage over them. Just as Chongshan Ghost King was struggling to hold on, Xiao Qun keenly noticed that Chongshan Ghost King's movement paused for a moment. He seized the opportunity and stabbed his long sword into Chongshan Ghost King's armpit. Then, he flicked his sword and sent one of Chongshan Ghost King's arms flying. After countless moves, Xiao Qun finally managed to severely injure Chongshan Ghost King. It had been almost an hour since the battle began. After sending Chongshan Ghost King's arm flying, Xiao Qun shouted coldly, "Brother Gudu, do it." Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya had fought together many times. Their tacit understanding was getting better and better. Hearing Xiao Qun's words, Gudu Wuya immediately understood what Xiao Qun meant. He gently tossed his long sword upward and formed a seal with both hands. A terrifying aura suddenly spread out from Gudu Wuya's body. Chapter 275. Understanding Xiao Qun's intention, Gudu Wuya formed a seal, and the longsword floating in the sky quickly turned into a blood-red lotus. The lotus looked demonic and gave people palpitations. Seeing the lotus taking shape, Chongshan Ghost King ignored the pain in his body, and his eyes twitched unconsciously. He was about to run away, but it was too late. Gudu Wuya shouted softly, "Red Lotus Sword Technique, 100 Reincarnation Lotus Kill." Along with Gudu Wuya's voice, the blood-red lotus shot toward Chongshan Ghost King. Chongshan Ghost King was like a rabbit whose tail was stepped on. He immediately jumped up and ran away. However, he was not as fast as the lotus. In the blink of an eye, the lotus caught up with him. Then, a dazzling red light burst out and swallowed Chongshan Ghost King's body. 100 Reincarnation Lotus Kill was the strongest move of the Red Lotus Sword technique and also Gudu Wuya's ultimate killing move. As Gudu Wuya's lotus hit Chongshan Ghost King, Xiao Qun did not stay idle. He pointed his finger and performed the Tai Yi sword finger. A sword radiance as thick as a mountain shot toward the red light and hit Chongshan Ghost King hard. First, he sent Chongshan Ghost King's arm flying. Then, Gudu Wuya's killing move, 100 Reincarnation Lotus Kill. Now, Xiao Qun's Tai Yi sword finger was a series of killing moves. No matter how strong Chongshan Ghost King was, he had no chance of survival. After successfully killing Chongshan Ghost King, the 10 geniuses attacked at the same time. However, in the end, it was Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya who killed the Ghost King first. "Everyone, Brother Gudu and I will go first. Remember who's going to buy us drinks. Don't go back on your words." Xiao Qun smiled at Huangfu Ao and the others who were still fighting fiercely. Then, he and Gudu Wuya rushed into the battle below to support the other geniuses. With one Ghost King dead, the other 2 geniuses joined the battle. Soon, the momentum of the Ghost Reading Army weakened. Facing Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya, even the heavenly ghosts were no match for them, let alone the Earth Mirror Reading Ghost. Their goal was clear. Xiao Qun and Gudu Wuya were going to slaughter those heavenly ghosts. There were hundreds of them, and as long as they were all taken care of, the remaining spirit-reading ghosts at Earth mirror level would not be able to do much, even if there were many of them. Huang Fu Ao and the others became even more desperate when they saw that Xiao Chen and Mu He had already killed Chongshan Ghost King. Their attacks became even more ferocious. In the end, Huang Fu Ao's group successfully killed Rockfall Ghost King. Mu He's group, who was one step behind them, also successfully killed 100 Trees Ghost King. With all 3 Ghost Kings dead and the 10 Lords of Pride joining the battle, victory was already set. With the 10 geniuses joining the battle, the rest was much simpler. The hundreds of heavenly ghosts were quickly slaughtered. Only the Earth mirror reading ghosts were left. Naturally, they could not hold on for long before they were all killed. The alliance formed by the 3 Ghost Kings was destroyed by the humans in less than 2 hours. With the end of the battle, the geniuses were powerlessly lying on the ground due to the backlash of the pills. Their faces were pained, but they all had excited smiles on their faces. They had finally won. One could imagine how much they had gained from this battle. Moreover, with the end of the battle, Xiao Chen's group had created an unprecedented record. They had completely killed all the Ghost Kings and half-step Ghost Kings in the 5 Elemental Dao Palace. Keep in mind that the 5 Elemental Dao Palace had opened countless times, but there had never been a time when the humans were able to kill all the Ghost Kings and half-step Ghost Kings. Basically, the Ghost King tribes were absolutely safe when the 5 Elemental Dao Palace opened because no humans dared to attack them. It was the same for half-step Ghost King tribes. Humans only dared to attack the smaller ghost reading tribes. However, this time, under the leadership of Xiao Chen and the other 10 geniuses, the humans had swept through the entire 5 Elemental Dao Palace. They had killed all the Ghost Kings and half-step Ghost Kings in the 5 Elemental Dao Palace. This was definitely a feat that no human had ever achieved before. After this battle, Xiao Chen's group had expended a lot of energy. However, they were all in a good mood. As mentioned before the battle, this was their last battle in the 5 Elemental Dao Palace. If they won, it would be a perfect ending to this trip. Mu He, Lin Nua, Huanggu, and Gu Mu, the 4 of you have lost. Don't forget to treat us to a drink when we return to the Heavenly Chen continent. Feng Lingye's face was pale, but he still had a smile on his face. He looked at Mu He and the other 3 and smiled. Mu He and the other 3 besieged the 100 Trees Ghost King, but they were the last to kill it. Therefore, according to the agreement, the 4 of them had to treat everyone to a drink. Hearing Feng Lingye's words, Mu He said unhappily, Motherf *Ker, we are so unlucky. Who knew that the 100 Trees Ghost King had mastered a recovery ability that could heal its injuries instantly? If it wasn't for that, we might have been the first to kill a Ghost King. Mu He felt sullen. In terms of strength, the 100 Trees Ghost King might not be the strongest among the 3 Ghost Kings. However, in terms of recovery and vitality, the 100 Trees Ghost King was definitely stronger than the Rockfall Ghost King and the Chongshan Ghost King. Due to the 100 Trees Ghost King's terrifying recovery and vitality, Mu He and the other 3 had to expend a lot of energy to kill it. Mu He, you have to keep your word. What's wrong? Are you going back on your word? Huang Fu Ao said with a smile. Who's going back on my word? Isn't it just a drink? It's on me. Haha, alright, but I don't drink ordinary wine. How about this? I heard that your Mu clan's patriarch, the Heavenly Wood Ruler, likes to brew wine. It's said that he has a jar of good wine that has been stored for more than 100 years. How about this, Mu He? You won't refuse, right? Huang Fu Ao continued. The jar of wine mentioned by Huang Fu Ao was definitely a treasure. Even the Heavenly Wood Ruler couldn't bear to drink it. Mu He's expression changed when he heard this. If it was something else, his patriarch might have agreed. However, that jar of wine was his patriarch's treasure. Even the other sovereigns coveted the jar of wine in the Heavenly Wood Ruler's hands. Now, Huang Fu Ao wanted Mu He to treat everyone to it. Mu He's expression turned ugly. However, under Huang Fu Ao's provocation, he finally braced himself and agreed. He thought to himself, at worst, I'll just steal some. After all, I won't take much. I'll just take out a little bit for everyone to taste. Haha, Mu He, you're the one who said it. If you can't keep your word, it'll be embarrassing. When Huang Fu Ao saw that Mu He had agreed, a smug expression appeared on his face. Everyone else also smiled. They were all looking forward to the Heavenly Wood Ruler's jar of wine. Chapter 276. After destroying the 3 Ghost King tribes, the 5 Elements Tao Palace no longer had any Ghost Niangue tribes that could threaten the humans. Furthermore, they had gained a lot from the battle. With a sufficient number of seeds of Taoism, there were still 5 days left before the 3-month deadline. In these last few days, Xiao Chun and the others also prepared to raise their cultivation level to the Celestial Realm, which was also the limit that could be achieved in the 5 Tao Palace. If they wanted to go further, they would have to break through to the Tao Querying Realm. However, in order to break through to the Tao Querying Realm, the seeds of Taoism were obviously useless. Because the Tao Intent seeds were useless for breaking through to the Tao Querying Realm, Xiao Chun and the others only kept enough for themselves. The rest were distributed to the geniuses below them. After all, the peak of the Celestial Realm was the limit for the Tao Intent seed. So, even if they had extra Tao Intent seeds, it would be useless. Besides, the Tao Intent seeds couldn't be brought out of the 5 Elements Tao Palace. Thus, it was better to distribute them to the geniuses. After distributing the spoils, Xiao Chun and the other geniuses entered secluded cultivation to break through to the peak of the Celestial Realm. It was already late at night in the heavenly Chun continent. The moon was high in the sky. As one of the 7 overlords of the heavenly Chun continent, the 9 Clouds Palace had undergone a drastic change. Or rather, the Celestial Sword Peak had undergone a drastic change. It was a peaceful night. Everything was normal. Suddenly, a talisman array that blotted out the sky rose up around the Celestial Sword Peak without any warning. It instantly enveloped the Celestial Sword Peak. The appearance of such a huge talisman array naturally alarmed the people from the other peaks. They all looked at the huge talisman array that had appeared out of nowhere. The peak lords of the other 8 peaks were shocked. How did that talisman array appear? And why did it surround the Celestial Sword Peak? Suddenly, the ruler of the 9 clouds appeared in the sky. He snorted coldly and said, "Who are you, little rascal? How dare you intrude into my 9 clouds palace?" The ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds raised his finger and released 9 clouds godly thunder. Purple lightning descended from the sky and crashed onto the talisman deployment spell. When the ruler of the 9 clouds attacked, the talisman array surrounding the Celestial Sword Peak was unharmed. It didn't even have the slightest ripple. The ruler of the 9 clouds frowned. It wasn't difficult for the ruler of the 9 clouds to see how powerful the talisman array was. It was a defensive talisman array that could block a ruler's attack. There weren't many talisman arrays like that in the heavenly Chun continent. Only the 7 overlords of the 9 clouds palace. The ruler of the 9 clouds palace. The ruler of the 9 clouds palace. He emperor of the 9 clouds demon cultivators. Emperor of the ruler of the 9 clouds palace. Emperor's emperor. As Tao emperors, the 4 demon envoys could be said to be the people the rulers paid attention to the most. But now, they had appeared on the Celestial Sword Peak without anyone noticing. They had even used a talisman to isolate the Celestial Sword Peak. The ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds said to the demon envoy indifferently, "Third demon envoy, what is the meaning of this? You want to throw yourself into a trap? You should know that even though the talisman array can stop me for a while, it won't last long." The rulers of the continent of the 9 clouds didn't know the names of the 4 envoys of the demon cultivators, so they just used numbers. The one in front of the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds was the 3rd demon envoy. The ruler of the 9 clouds palace had already guessed that the 3rd demon envoy was here for some reason. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the risk to come to Nine Clouds Palace. He looked at the third demon envoy coldly. As soon as the ruler of the Nine Clouds said that, another person in black clothes appeared next to the third demon envoy. It was the fourth demon envoy. Nine Clouds, we don't need to stay here for long. Once we get what we want, we'll leave, said the fourth demon envoy hoarsely. As expected, the demon cultivators had indeed come here for a reason. There was obviously something they wanted on the Celestial Sword Peak. But what was it about the Celestial Sword Peak that made two demon envoys come here at the same time? There were only 4 demon envoys amongst the demonic cultivators in Heavenly Chen continent. At present, however, 2 of them had appeared in Nine Firmaments Palace. This proved that the item within Heavenly Sword Peak was very important to them. Thus, the demonic cultivators had not hesitated to send out 2 demon envoys. They had been able to sneak into Nine Clouds Palace without anyone noticing and set up such a large-scale talisman array. It was obvious that the demon cultivators had been preparing for this for a long time. The ruler of the Nine Clouds realized how serious the situation was, but he had underestimated how important the things on the Celestial Sword Peak were to the demon cultivators. After the third and fourth demon envoys appeared, the first and second demon envoys appeared as well. When the first and second demon envoys appeared, the ruler of the Nine Clouds was astonished. The 4 demon envoys had all gathered together. Without hesitation, the ruler of the Nine Clouds immediately sent a message to the other rulers, telling them to hurry up and help Nine Clouds Palace. The 4 demon envoys had all gathered in Nine Clouds Palace. This was no small matter. The ruler of the Nine Clouds looked at the 4 demon envoys seriously. He didn't say anything, but directly started attacking the talisman array. Although the talisman array was strong, it couldn't stop the ruler of the Nine Clouds for too long. Besides, the other rulers should be on their way as well. They would arrive in an hour at the earliest. When the ruler of the Nine Clouds started attacking the talisman array, the 4 demon envoys remained calm. I'll go get the key. Fourth brother, you take charge of the array. Give me an hour. When the other 3 demon envoys heard that, they nodded. The 4th demon envoy sat down cross-legged and focused on the talisman array. With a Tao Emperor Realm expert personally holding down the fort, the might of this talisman formation had naturally improved greatly. If the ruler of the Nine Clouds had been able to destroy the talisman array in 15 minutes before, now, he wouldn't be able to destroy it in 2 hours. The first demon envoys flew down. The ruler of the Nine Clouds frowned and looked in the direction the first demon envoys had left. He couldn't help but shout, "Dustless residence!" Indeed, the first demon envoys had landed in the dustless residence. In other words, the thing the demon cultivators wanted was in the dustless residence. But the dustless residence was Xiao Chen's residence. What did the demon cultivators want? Besides, Xiao Chen wasn't in the dustless residence. Why had the 4 demon envoys come at such a time? What was their goal? Chapter 277. The first demon envoy landed in the direction of the dustless residence. At the same time, the disciples and elders of the Heavenly Sword Peak were also rushing towards the dustless residence under the lead of the trio. When the first demon envoy landed, over 1,000 disciples and elders of the Heavenly Sword Peak surrounded him. Led by Tsang Xian, Tsang Yun, and Tsang Long, everyone from the Heavenly Sword Peak looked nervous, but they did not show any intention of retreating. A bunch of ants want to stop me? Facing the obstruction of everyone, the first demon envoy revealed a terrifying sneer beneath his black robes. Then, am I qualified to stop you? Just as the first demon envoy's voice fell, a lazy voice echoed out. Then, the pill cloud ruler swayed as he walked over from the distance. His steps weren't fast and were rather light. But even so, in just several steps, the pill cloud ruler appeared in front of the first demon envoy. The pill cloud ruler was still living in seclusion in the Celestial Sword Peak, which meant that the Celestial Sword Peak had a ruler there. When the crowd saw the pill cloud ruler, they took a deep breath. It wasn't the worst situation yet. With a ruler there, they could at least buy some time. As long as the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds destroyed the talisman deployment spell, they would be saved. After all, the Tiantian continent had more Dao emperors than the demon cultivators. Everyone rejoiced in their hearts, but the first demon envoy wasn't surprised at all. He'd long since known that an almighty Dao Emperor realm expert was hiding on Heavenly Sword Peak. Moreover, it was an expert who'd attained perfection in the Dao Emperor realm. So, the first demon envoy was prepared. If it were any other time, I would love to have a big fight with you. Unfortunately, my target tonight is not you. As the first demon envoy's voice fell, the second and third demon envoys in the sky moved at the same time, entangling the pill cloud sovereign. The 4 demon envoys had come to Sky Sword Peak because of Dominator Pill Cloud. If Dominator Pill Cloud wasn't living in seclusion in Sky Sword Peak, they wouldn't need to send 4 demon envoys. At this time, the second and third demon envoys were entangled with Dao Sovereign Pill Cloud. For a time, it would be difficult for him to extricate himself. If it was a one-on-one battle, then Dao Sovereign Pill Cloud had a chance of winning. But, facing 2 demon envoys at the same time was clearly a bit difficult for him, much less the first demon envoy. That was simply impossible. 2 demon envoys were keeping the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds busy, and 1 demon envoy was controlling the talisman deployment spell to fight against the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds. The demon cultivators had done a lot of preparation for tonight's mission. When the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds saw that the 2 demon envoys were fighting against ruler Pill Cloud, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds looked grim. Before, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds was happy because of ruler Pill Cloud, but now he was also fighting against the 2 demon envoys. Things were getting worse. Everyone, attack the glyph array with all your strength. There was no time to waste. They had to break the glyph array as quickly as possible. Otherwise, ruler Pill Cloud would not be able to hold on for long. There were 4 demon envoys inside the glyph array, after all. Not even ruler Pill Cloud could fight against 4 demon envoys alone. He ordered the cultivators from 9 Firmament's palace to attack the glyph array with all their strength. Instantly, the cultivators from 9 Firmament's palace soared into the sky. With the 8 peak lords in the lead, over 1,000 cultivators attacked the glyph array furiously. The ruler of the continent of the 9 Firmament's palace also took action, wanting to break the glyph array as quickly as possible. With so many cultivators attacking the glyph array at the same time, the 4th demon envoy, who was in charge of controlling the glyph array, was under great pressure. He sent a secret vocal transmission to the first demon envoy, "Hurry! I can't hold on for long. Take the items and leave." Everyone from 9 Firmament's palace gathered their strength to break the glyph array. Clearly, the glyph array would not be able to hold on for long. Hearing the 4th demon envoy's words, the first demon envoy sneered. He swept his gaze over the cultivators from Heavenly Sword Peak and said icily, "Looks like I don't need to waste my breath. It's impossible for you all to take the initiative to move aside. If that's the case, you all can die." The first demon envoy couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with the cultivators from Heavenly Sword Peak. The moment he said that, a terrifying pressure erupted from his body. Under the pressure of this pressure, some of the disciples from Heavenly Sword Peak with low cultivation levels coughed out blood and died on the spot. Just a strand of the pressure he emitted was enough to take the lives of many of the disciples. Seeing this, Song Xian's face sank. However, before he could say anything, the first demon envoy made a grasping motion across space. A massive force, like a giant hand, instantly grabbed Song Xian, Song Long and Song Yun. "A bunch of ants want to block me? What a joke!" The first demon envoy sneered. Then, he clenched his fist and Song Xian's group of 3 were crushed into a mist of blood. Just like that, the 3 peak lords of Heavenly Sword Peak died. Looking at the corpses of Song Xian's group, everyone was stunned. However, this was just the beginning. After killing Song Xian's group of 3, the first demon envoy didn't stop. He coldly shouted, "From the moment I appeared, the heavenly sword peak was destined to flow with rivers of blood. Ants die." It was clear that the first demon envoy didn't plan on letting anyone from Heavenly Sword Peak go. The first demon envoy began a frenzied slaughter. He didn't seem to move at all, but masses of blood-red fog condensed around him. This fog soon turned into blood-red heads that opened their jaws and bit down on the crowd. These blood-red heads were extremely fast and simply impossible to destroy. Or, it could be said that the crowd's strength wasn't enough to destroy these blood-red heads. Miserable screams echoed throughout Heavenly Sword Peak. Seeing his fellow apprentice brothers fall down one by one, Qin Heng protected Qi Yan and retreated. No one thought that a calamity would descend upon the Heavenly Sword Peak without any warning. Song Xian's group of 3 had already died. Qin Heng knew that no one from Heavenly Sword Peak could stop the first demon envoy. He constantly brandished his sword, but in front of the first demon envoy's formidable strength, Qin Heng's resistance was completely useless. A blood-red head rushed over, its jaws wide open as it bit down on Qin Heng's neck. Qin Heng slashed out with his sword, but it didn't have any effect on the blood-red head. The blood-red head bit down on Qin Heng's throat and began to crazily suck out his blood. In just a dozen breaths of time, Qin Heng had become a withered corpse. Seeing Qin Heng die with her own eyes, Qi Yan cried out in grief. "Senior apprentice brother," tears wet her eyes. In less than 100 breaths of time, her master Song Xian had died, and her senior apprentice brother Qin Heng had also died. And all of this had happened right in front of her eyes. At this moment, Qi Yan seemed to have lost her soul. In front of a Dao Emperor Realm Master, they didn't have the slightest ability to resist. In the end, even when the blood-red head bit down on her throat, Qi Yan didn't react at all. Her empty eyes stared blankly at the sky. Against the backdrop of the night sky, Qi Yan seemed to see the back of a white-clothed youth. She couldn't help but smile. In the final moment, Qi Yan smiled sweetly and said, "Junior apprentice brother, it's a good thing you aren't on Heavenly Sword Peak. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 278. In her final moments, the only thing Qi Yan rejoiced about was that Xiao Qin wasn't at the Heavenly Sword Peak. Like this, their bloodline hadn't been completely annihilated because her junior brother was still alive. Tears flowed from her eyes, but a smile hung on her lips. She cried because her master and senior brother had died, but she smiled because Xiao Qin was still alive. Finally, Qi Yan felt her vision become more and more blurry. The white-clothed youth in the sky also gradually became blurry. The aura of death constantly surged in her heart. In the end, Qi Yan perished. Qi Yan's death was a very ordinary scene for the current Heavenly Sword Peak. This was because the entire Heavenly Sword Peak was filled with blood-colored heads flying around. Every second, a disciple or elder of the Heavenly Sword Peak would fall. To the disciples and elders of the Heavenly Sword Peak, this calamity had come so suddenly without any warning. Moreover, the people of the Heavenly Sword Peak had no way to deal with this calamity. They only felt powerless and despair. The first demon envoy slowly walked through the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood. He didn't care about the slaughter of the people of the Heavenly Sword Peak. These people were only a portion of the people he had killed in his life, a drop in the ocean. Stepping on the corpses, the first demon envoy entered the dustless residence. In the front courtyard, he saw Qin Shuru with a sorrowful and despairing expression, as well as Qin Yao and Qin Luo. Facing the calamity of the Heavenly Sword Peak, Qin Shuru was filled with grief, but there was nothing he could do. Even when his own brother died, Qin Shuru couldn't do anything to save him. Qin Shuru clenched his fists as he faced the first demon envoy. His nails dug into his flesh as he gritted his teeth. Qin Shuru coldly said, If you want to kill me, then kill me. In the face of death, Qin Shuru calmed down instead. He was powerless to resist. If he wanted to hate someone, he could only hate himself for being too weak. In front of a Tao emperor, he was an ant-like existence. How could an ant escape the fate of being trampled to death? In the face of death, Qin Shuru only felt a strong reluctance. He couldn't bear to part with Shao Chen. Hearing Qin Shuru's words, the first demon envoy faintly smiled. You can't die yet. As the first demon envoy spoke, he gently stretched out his right hand. An illusory arm formed from spiritual strength stretched into Qin Shuru's body. It was as if he was searching for something. Facing the first demon envoy's actions, Qin Yao and Qin Luo, who were behind Qin Shuru, seemed to be suppressed by some kind of power. They couldn't move at all and could only watch as everything happened. Qin Shuru could clearly feel that the first demon envoy's spiritual arm was stripping away something from his body. As time passed, Qin Shuru instinctively felt as if something was being taken out of his body. At the same time as this thing disappeared, he felt as if his body was breaking through its shackles. In fact, even Qin Shuru didn't know that she had been a mother body since she was a child, a mother body used to nourish the devil cultivator's key, and this key was called the blood demon mark. In the battle 3,000 years ago, the devil cultivators were defeated by the heavenly Chen continent. However, a portion of the devil cultivators luckily survived and hid in the heavenly Chen continent. After thousands of years of planning and hiding, these devil cultivators finally found a way to construct a new spatial channel. That was the blood demon mark. The blood demon mark was the most precious treasure of the devil cultivator's world. It could open up space and time and accurately connect to the continent where the devil cultivators resided. From there, it could connect the continent where the devil cultivators resided to the heavenly Chen continent. 3,000 years ago, the devil cultivator's army also found this method through the spatial channel opened up by the blood demon mark. After the battle, the blood demon mark was also lost in the heavenly Chen continent. After a few generations of devil cultivators searched for it, they found the blood devil brand in the end. Unfortunately, the blood devil brand had been severely damaged from the battle, and it wasn't sufficient to construct a spatial passageway. Moreover, repairing it was extremely troublesome, and even Tao Emperor realm experts were unable to accomplish it. Even Tao emperors couldn't do it. But after deep research, the first demon envoy finally found a way to repair the blood demon mark. If he wanted to repair the blood demon mark, he had to find someone with an extreme Yin physique. He had to place the blood demon mark in their body and use that special physique's cold Yin energy to nourish it. Only then would the blood demon mark gradually recover over the years. The extreme Yin physique mentioned here wasn't a low-grade physique like the Yin spirit physique. Instead, it had to be a peak physique. However, although the heavenly Chen continent had an innumerable population, there wasn't a single person with a peak Yin physique. In order to find such a person, the first demon envoy could be said to have used over 100 years to travel to every corner of the heavenly Chen continent. He first started from the central divine realm. But after a round, not a single person met the requirements. Those with extreme Yin physiques had too low a grade and weren't enough to nourish the blood demon mark. There wasn't a single person in the central divine realm. Then, the first demon envoy went to the other 4 great regions. Finally, he arrived at the Eastern Sun region. Just as the first demon envoy was about to give up, he encountered a newborn baby. And this baby was Qin Shuru. He was born with an innate cold energy, and it was extremely cold. Even as a Tao Emperor Realm Supreme Elder, the first demon envoy still felt a chill when he saw Qin Shuru for the first time. With such an extreme cold, it was clear that Qin Shuru's extreme Yin physique wasn't simple at all. After flipping through a great number of ancient texts, the first demon envoy finally found an introduction to Qin Shuru's physique. The ice god physique was a physique that only existed in legends. No one knew whether it actually existed or not. It was only said that in ancient times, an ice god physique had appeared in the world, and this record was based on that ancient ice god physique. Most of the records regarding the ice god physique were guesses, but they matched Qin Shuru extremely well. The first demon envoy guessed that Qin Shuru might have the ice god physique. And if this was true, then Qin Shuru would completely meet the requirements to nourish the blood demon mark. Moreover, he would exceed them by far too much. With the ice god physique nourishing him, it would greatly shorten the recovery time of the blood demon mark. For a time, the first demon envoy was incomparably excited. Without hesitation, he planted the blood demon mark into Qin Shuru's body. And no one in the Qin family knew of this. But thinking about it, how could the ants of the Qin family possibly detect the actions of a Dao emperor? Like this, Qin Shuru became the main body of the blood demon mark. From a young age, the blood demon mark was nourished. And in order to prevent others from discovering Qin Shuru's ice god physique, the first demon envoy also used some tricks to turn Qin Shuru's ice god physique into a Yin spirit physique. Of course, this was only a smokescreen. This was a plan that had been laid out over 20 years ago. But now, because of the strength of the ice god physique, the blood demon mark had been restored to its peak in just over 20 years. The first demon envoy had finally completed the long-cherished wish of several generations of demonic cultivators. As he felt the blood demon mark constantly being stripped from Qin Shuru's body, the first demon envoy couldn't help but laugh out loud. Haha, 3,000 years, 3,000 years. I've finally succeeded, I've finally succeeded. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 279. 3,000 years of preparation had finally been completed in his own hand. The first demon envoy laughed heartily. Following his laughter, a palm-sized mark slowly flew out from Qin Shuru's body. As this mark appeared, a brutal, bloodthirsty, and terrifying aura spread out. This was the most precious treasure of the world of demonic cultivators, the blood demon mark. Even the first demon envoy couldn't help but reveal an excited expression as he saw the blood demon mark. He carefully put it away. With the blood demon mark, the demonic cultivators would be able to open up a space channel once more, allowing their army to descend upon the heavenly Chun continent once more. And this time, the demonic cultivators would absolutely not fail. They would make the heavenly Chun continent submit to them. After the blood demon mark was completely stripped away, Qin Shuru's hair began to turn as white as snow from the roots. His originally black hair had now turned white. The white hair fluttered in the wind. It could be said that without the suppression of the blood demon mark, Qin Shuru's ice goddess physique had completely erupted. After all, Qin Shuru had used most of his strength to nourish the blood demon mark. In truth, the ice goddess physique didn't give Qin Shuru too many benefits. But now that the blood demon mark had been stripped away, the ice goddess physique was gradually revealing its loftiness. The white hair was the most direct manifestation of the ice goddess physique's gradual awakening. The first demon envoy didn't care about Qin Shuru's changes. He put away the blood demon mark and looked at Qin Shuru. His expression gradually returned to normal and his voice became hoarse once more. Little girl, this seat can give you a chance to live. If you acknowledge me as your master, I will take you away. The first demon envoy didn't plan on directly killing Qin Shuru. The first demon envoy cherished talent. Qin Shuru possessed the legendary ice goddess physique. Such a physique was extremely powerful. If he could grow up, it could be said that he would definitely reach the Dao Emperor realm. He wanted to take Qin Shuru as his disciple. Hearing the first demon envoy's words, Qin Shuru coldly smiled. His eyes were filled with hatred as he said, "Take me as your disciple? You think you're worthy?" Everyone from Heavenly Sword Peak, including his own brother Qin Shuru, had died at the hands of the first demon envoy. The hatred in Qin Shuru's heart could be imagined. Hearing Qin Shuru's words, A trace of disappointment flashed in the first demon envoy's eyes. This was an ice god physique. This was absolutely a rare seedling that only appeared once in 100 years. Unfortunately, Qin Shuru wouldn't take him as his master. The first demon envoy was well aware of this. And since he couldn't subdue Qin Shuru, he naturally couldn't allow this ice god physique to continue growing. This danger had to be nipped in the cradle. Thinking of this, the first demon envoy's eyes erupted with a terrifying killing intent. He coldly said, "Since you want to die, then don't blame me." As the first demon envoy spoke, he thrust out a finger. A blood-red finger light rapidly shot towards Qin Shuru's forehead. This was only a casual attack from the first demon envoy, but Qin Shuru didn't have the ability to resist at all. He couldn't even move. He could only stare helplessly on as that blood-red finger light drew closer and closer to him. He already thought that he would die without a doubt. But just as this finger light was about to pierce through Qin Shuru's forehead, in this critical moment, the Pill Cloud Sovereign that was fighting with the second and third demon envoys suddenly appeared in front of Qin Shuru. He thrust out a palm, blocking this sure-kill strike for Qin Shuru. The Pill Cloud Sovereign's appearance caused the first demon envoy's face to sink. At the same time, the second and third demon envoys also flashed, arriving at the first demon envoy's side. Just now, the second and third demon envoys had joined forces to attack the Pill Cloud Sovereign. But when they saw that Qin Shuru was in danger, Tao Sovereign Pill Cloud had forcefully used a secret technique to force the two of them back. Only then did he dare to save Qin Shuru. The Pill Cloud Sovereign shielded Qin Shuru behind him. At this time, he didn't seem as lazy as he usually was. His eyes were as bright as the stars in the sky. The aura of a perfect Tao Emperor soared into the sky as he looked at the three demon envoys. The truth is that I've always hated fighting and killing. But, as he spoke, the Pill Cloud Sovereign stretched out a hand. An inexplicable strength appeared, instantly sealing off the entire space. Feeling the space around them completely sealed off, the first demon envoy's expression changed. He looked at the Pill Cloud Sovereign and said in alarm, "This is the laws, the power of laws." The power of laws was a power that could only be grasped after breaking through the Tao Emperor realm and entering a higher realm. Although he was shocked, the first demon envoy quickly calmed down. The power of laws that the Pill Cloud Sovereign used was only the tip of the iceberg. In other words, the Pill Cloud Sovereign had only touched upon the threshold of the power of laws. He hadn't even crossed the threshold. If he forcefully used the power of laws, he wouldn't be able to display the true power of laws. He wouldn't even be able to display 1/10,000th of its power. Moreover, the Pill Cloud Sovereign wouldn't be able to hold on for long. However, even then, it was already sufficiently terrifying. After all, Tao Exalt Danyun was only at the Tao Emperor realm, yet he'd already touched the threshold of the laws. In other words, Tao Exalt Danyun was very close to breaking through to the Tao Emperor realm, and it was even to the extent that he'd taken a step forward. Retreat. Without hesitation, the first demon envoy chose to retreat. He had already obtained the Blood Demon mark. There was no need to stay any longer. Moreover, the other sovereigns of the heavenly stellar continent were probably on their way to reinforce him. It would be dangerous to delay any longer. He no longer thought about killing Qin Shuru. After all, with the Pill Cloud Sovereign here, it was impossible to do so. Even if it was possible, it would waste a lot of time. It wasn't worth it. Thus, he chose to retreat. Hearing the first demon envoy's words, the three demon envoys attacked at the same time. A terrifying power swept across the horizon. The Pill Cloud Sovereign's power of laws was quickly defeated. After all, the Pill Cloud Sovereign had only touched upon the threshold of the power of laws. It was impossible for him to stop the three demon envoys. After defeating the Pill Cloud Sovereign's power of laws, the first demon envoy and the three demon envoys activated the transmission talismans in their hands. Seeing the 4 demon envoys preparing to leave, a cold light flashed in the Pill Cloud Sovereign's eyes. He raised his hand and pressed down. A terrifying power of laws descended from the sky, instantly interrupting the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th demon envoys' transmission talismans. "Don't you think it's too late to leave now?" His voice was cold. The 4 demon envoys prepared to retreat. They even used their transmission talismans. But even so, the Pill Cloud Sovereign still blocked 3 of them. Apart from the 1st demon envoy, who had used his strength at the peak of the Tao Emperor realm to activate the transmission talisman, the other 3 demon envoys were blocked by the Pill Cloud Sovereign. The 2nd demon envoy and the other 2 demon envoys looked extremely gloomy when they saw the Pill Cloud Sovereign interrupt their transmission talismans. At the same time, without the 4th demon envoy's control, the talisman formation around the Celestial Sword Peak was destroyed by the Pill Cloud Sovereign. The 3 demon envoys were surrounded. Chapter 280. Without the protection of the talisman spell, the strong cultivators of 9 Cloud Palace flew to Celestial Sword Peak. The Tao Kings and Tao Sovereigns surrounded the 3 demon envoys. As for the cultivators below the Tao King layer, they rushed into Celestial Sword Peak to save the injured. They had already guessed that Heavenly Sword Peak would suffer heavy losses this time. But when they arrived at Heavenly Sword Peak, they realized that this wasn't just a matter of heavy losses. Rather, the entire Heavenly Sword Peak had been completely annihilated. At the very least, all the high-level figures of Heavenly Sword Peak had been killed off by the 1st demon envoy. The ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds looked down at Celestial Sword Peak. His eyes were filled with killing intent. At the same time, Ruler Pill Cloud flew up and landed in front of the 3 demon envoys. He and the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds stood side by side. The 3 demon envoys were left behind, but the 1st demon envoy had managed to escape. Ruler Pill Cloud looked at the 3 demon envoys coldly and said indifferently, "One escaped, but the 3 of you will die." They already knew that the Pill Cloud Sovereign was an existence that had touched upon the power of laws. Thus, the 2nd demon envoy didn't doubt that the Pill Cloud Sovereign could kill the 3 of them. The power of laws was far too mysterious. Even they didn't have the qualifications to touch upon it. But there was one thing they didn't doubt, and that was just how powerful the power of laws was. Even though Ruler Pill Cloud had only touched upon the threshold of cosmic energies, he was still much stronger than ordinary cultivators at the peak of the Tao Emperor layer. The 3 demon envoys hadn't even reached the peak of the Tao Emperor layer yet. The actions of the 4 devil envoys today were unforgivable. Without wasting any more words, Tao Sovereign Danyun chose to strike out directly. Slapping out with his palm, a terrifying palm imprint descended from the sky like a huge mountain. When Tao Master Pill Cloud attacked, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds couldn't just stand by and watch. He raised his finger, and 9 clouds godly lightning descended from the sky. The godly lightning contained the power of cosmic energies. It wasn't just Tao Master Pill Cloud. The ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds had also touched upon the threshold of cosmic energies. As the strongest rulers of the heavenly Chen continent, the 3 demon envoys were filled with despair when facing 2 rulers who had touched upon the power of cosmic energies. If they had only faced ordinary cultivators at the peak of the Tao Emperor layer, they might have had a chance to escape. Unfortunately, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds and Tao Emperor Pill Cloud weren't ordinary cultivators at the peak of the Tao Emperor layer, but they had already touched upon the threshold of the Tao Emperor layer. The 2 of them attacked at the same time. The terrifying atmosphere of power they exuded caused the hearts of the surrounding cultivators from 9 Firmaments Palace to palpitate. It was too horrifying. The vast amount of spiritual energy was nothing. The most important thing was the strands of blurry power of laws. The appearance of the strands of power of laws shocked the surrounding cultivators. Envoys. The 3 demon envoys of the 9 clouds were injured. Ones. The 3 demon envoys were already injured. They couldn't last for long. After a quarter of an hour, the 2 demon envoys killed them. They had killed the 3 demon envoys, but the ruler and the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds' expressions didn't change. Even though the 3 demon envoys were dead, they couldn't change what had happened in Celestial Sword Peak. Too many people had died that night. After the deaths of the 3 demon envoys, the other sovereigns of the Heavenly Stellar Continent also arrived. The Skyburn ruler, Heavenly Pill ruler, Heavenly Wood ruler and the others appeared. When they saw the sovereigns gathered at 9 Firmament's palace, they were all shocked. One by one, they knelt towards the sky. The rulers didn't stay for long. They quickly left and went to the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds mountain peak. The 8 peak leaders were in charge of the aftermath of the Celestial Sword Peak. On the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds mountain peak, the rulers were seated together. The 4 demon envoys had come to the 9 clouds palace in person. According to ruler Pill Cloud, they had come to retrieve something. That thing was in Qin Shuru's body. Because he had been in the Celestial Sword Peak the whole time, ruler Pill Cloud had seen the blood demon imprint. Even though he had only seen it from a distance, the chi of the blood demon imprint was still fresh in his mind. The 4 demon envoys had paid such a great price for the blood demon imprint. They had even killed 3 of them. It was obvious how important the blood demon imprint was to the 4 demon envoys. However, the rulers didn't know what the blood demon imprint was for. After some discussion, the rulers found it strange. There had to be some inside story. However, they couldn't be sure what the blood demon imprint was. In the end, after some discussion, someone suggested that they check on Qin Shuru personally. After all, the blood demon imprint had been taken from Qin Shuru's body. Maybe they could find some clues on Qin Shuru's body. The rulers didn't have any bad intentions. They just wanted to find some clues. The rulers of the continent of the 9 clouds and ruler Pill Cloud didn't refuse. That night, ruler Pill Cloud took Qin Shuru away. After checking Qin Shuru's body, they didn't find any traces of the blood demon imprint. Instead, some rulers could tell that Qin Shuru had an ice god body. If the first demon envoy could tell that Qin Shuru had an ice god body, the rulers could do the same. When they learned that Qin Shuru had the legendary ice god body, the rulers were pleasantly surprised. Normally, the rulers would have gone crazy. After all, he had the ice god body, a legendary body. But now, the situation was critical. The 4 demon envoys had paid such a great price to obtain the blood demon imprint. Their goal couldn't be simple. Therefore, the rulers didn't pay too much attention to Qin Shuru. While the sovereigns were searching for clues regarding the blood demon imprint, the Sky Sword Peak's cleanup work was more or less completed. After a day and night of counting, the Sky Sword Peak only had 38 survivors. This was simply unheard of. The Sky Sword Peak had more than 10,000 people, but only 38 people were still alive. The 8 leaders of Celestial Sword Peak were in charge of everything. The rulers focused all their attention on the blood demon imprint. After all, it was related to the safety of the Heavenly Chun continent. It was a matter of utmost importance. After 3 days of discussion, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds was the first to guess. Do you think the blood demon imprint is the key to opening the passage? Opening the passage? What you mean is that the 4 demon envoys did everything they could to obtain the blood demon imprint so that they could open the passage to the demon cultivator's world. Don't talk carelessly, continent of the 9 clouds. If the passage is opened, the consequences will be unimaginable, said the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 281. The ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds guessed that the blood demon imprint was the key to opening the passage. After all, the rulers were convinced that the demon cultivators who were hiding in the Heavenly Chun continent wanted to open the passage so that the demon cultivators could come back to the Heavenly Chun continent. This was the ultimate goal of the remaining Xiamois. Thus, only the matter of the spatial passage was worth the Xiamoists paying such a painful price to obtain the blood demon imprint. They had sacrificed 3 demon envoys in exchange for the blood demon imprint. If they hadn't wanted to open the space tunnel, would the demon cultivators have made such a desperate gamble? The demon cultivators only had 4 demon envoys in total. If they lost 3 demon envoys at once, the consequences would be obvious. Unless they could open the space tunnel, then even if the 3 demon envoys died, it would be worth it. When the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds said that, the rulers remained silent. If that was really the case, then the situation was very serious. I think it's useless to think about that now. No matter what the demon cultivators' ultimate goal is, we have to stop them. We have to take back the blood demon imprint as quickly as possible. If the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds is right and the blood demon imprint is the key to opening the space tunnel, then we can't let the demon cultivators succeed. Otherwise, the entire heavenly Chen continent will be doomed. No matter what the demon cultivators' ultimate goal was, the rulers had to stop them, especially if they wanted to open the space tunnel. They had to stop the demon cultivators at all costs. Hearing Sovereign Pillcloud's words, the other sovereigns silently nodded. Then, they unanimously decided to launch an all-out counterattack against the demonic cultivators. No matter what method they used, they had to find the first demon envoy and snatch the mark from his hand. After making a decision, the rulers issued a ruler's celestial command at the same time. All the influential groups of the heavenly Qin continent had to obey the ruler's celestial command. It was supposed to be a peaceful day, but at noon, a screen of light appeared in the sky. At the same time, the voices of the rulers echoed across the sky, spreading to every corner of the heavenly Chen continent. The sovereign's command was very simple. All forces of the heavenly stellar continent were to immediately participate in the extermination of the demonic cultivators. At the same time, the Central Divine Region, Eastern Sun Region, West Sea Region, Southern Wind Region, and Northern Peak Region would be the final extermination of the demonic cultivators. The entire heavenly stellar continent launched a purge of demonic cultivators at the same time, and this time, all the sovereigns would participate as well. They would no longer defend the 4 great passes and would launch an all-out attack. Their number 1 target was naturally the almighty Tao Emperor Realm figure, the first demon envoy. There was no room for discussion. All forces had to unconditionally participate in this cleanup operation. In addition, anyone who dared to hide, harbor, or contact demonic cultivators would be exterminated. Not even a chicken or dog would be spared. The sovereigns' voices were filled with majesty and coldness. Everyone's hearts trembled when they heard the sovereign's heavenly decree. It was just as the Pill Cloud sovereign had said. This time, the sovereigns would spare no expense to find the first demon envoy and take back the mark. The heavenly stellar continent's crazy counterattack erupted. Demonic cultivators were found and killed one after another. In just a few hours, under the sovereign's high pressure, tens of thousands of demonic cultivators were killed. It could be said that in just a few hours, the remaining demonic cultivators of the heavenly stellar continent had been completely annihilated. Every martial artist participated in the search for the demonic cultivators. This time, no one had a choice because if they didn't participate, they would be killed. The sovereign's heavenly decree could not be disobeyed, especially this time's sovereign's heavenly decree. The sovereign's orders had no room for negotiation. The results of the battle could be said to be a great joy. However, the sovereigns weren't happy at all because there was still no news of the first demon envoy. The mark was in the first demon envoy's hands. If they couldn't find him, then even if they killed all the remaining demonic cultivators, as long as the first demon envoy opened up a space channel, the heavenly stellar continent would still lose. This was because an even greater army of demonic cultivators would arrive at the heavenly stellar continent through the space channel. Seeing the demonic cultivators of the heavenly stellar continent being killed one after another, the first demon envoy seemed to have evaporated into thin air. He didn't care that his influence was rapidly being exterminated by the sovereigns. As the sovereigns were anxiously searching for the first demon envoy was hiding in a remote mountain village at the edge of the West Sea. At this time, atop an extremely ordinary mountain peak, the first demon envoy was sitting cross-legged. A fist-sized black hole floated in front of him, and his eyes were filled with excitement. This small black hole was formed from the blood demon mark, and was also the elementary form of a space channel. In just 3 more days the space channel would form. At that time, the demonic cultivator army would arrive at the heavenly stellar continent through the space channel. He no longer cared about the life or death of the other demonic cultivators. In the first demon envoy's opinion, even if all the demonic cultivators of the heavenly stellar continent died, as long as he could open up a space channel, everything would be worth it. Once the demonic cultivator army arrived, the heavenly stellar continent would surely be destroyed. The heavenly stellar continent will finally belong to my demonic cultivator army. Haha, after 300 years, I have finally fulfilled the long-cherished wish of several generations, haha. The first demon envoy couldn't help but raise his head to the skies and laugh. 3 days, there were only 3 more days left. Once the space channel formed, even the sovereigns would be powerless to reverse the situation. As the winds and clouds of the heavenly stellar continent were changing, Shao Qin and the others in the 5 Tao Palace had also successfully broken through to the peak of the sky human realm. Like this, their trip to the 5 Tao Palace could be considered complete. And today it was time for them to leave. 5 Elements City was no longer as grand as before. As for the matter of the prodigies leaving the 5 Elements Tao Palace, the sovereigns did not appear. Only 4 Tao sovereigns came to receive the sovereigns with the sovereigns' tokens. In the central hall of 5 Elements City, the 4 Tao sovereigns formed seals at the same time. The time had come, and the 4 opened the entrance of the 5 Elements Tao Palace. For a moment, Shao Qin and the others were immediately pushed out of the 5 Elements Tao Palace by an inexplicable force. The world spun before their eyes, and when they regained their clarity, they were already in the central hall of 5 Elements City. Looking at the prodigies coming out of the 5 Elements Tao Palace, the 4 Tao sovereigns nodded slightly. Although more than a dozen prodigies were missing, the number of casualties was still very small. It was the smallest number of casualties ever since the opening of the 5 Elements Tao Palace. Of course, if the 4 Tao sovereigns knew that the 5 Elements Tao Palace had been swept clean by Shao Qin and the others, it was unknown what their expressions would be. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 282. Looking at the geniuses before him, he nodded slightly. However, just as the 4 Tao sovereigns were about to say something, one of their faces changed abruptly. He glared at the leader of the 10 geniuses and said, "All of you have broken through to the full circle of the sky human stage?" They hadn't noticed it at first, but when they realized that the 10 great prides had all reached the great circle of the sky human stage, the 4 Tao sovereigns felt their hearts tremble. Theoretically speaking, it was possible to break through to the great circle of the sky human stage in the 5 Tao Palace without any hindrance. However, that was only if one had enough Tao intent seeds. Obtaining Tao intent seeds was easier said than done. In the past, those who managed to break through to the sky human stage were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns, let alone the great circle of the sky human stage. They were shocked by the 10 great prides' improvement, but this was just the beginning. Next, the 4 Tao sovereigns looked at the other geniuses, and their expressions became increasingly interesting. All the peerless geniuses had broken through to the low level of the sky human stage, while the top geniuses had all reached the great circle of the Earth Spire stage. This was crazy. Everyone had improved by leaps and bounds. God knows how many mind-reading ghosts they had to kill in order to achieve this. Their hearts were filled with shock. This was definitely the greatest harvest they had gained since the appearance of the 5 elemental Tao Palace. While the 4 of them were still in shock, He looked at one of the white-haired old men and said, "Granduncle, why are you here? Doesn't the 5 elemental Tao Palace require sovereigns to open?" The old man was from the Mu family. In terms of seniority, he was He's granduncle. Hearing He's words, the old man snapped out of his daze and a solemn look flashed across his eyes. The entire heavenly Chun continent was in a state of chaos. The old man sighed softly and finally spoke. "Something has happened in the heavenly Chun continent. The sovereigns are having a hard time getting away, so—" He didn't hide anything from the other geniuses and told them everything that had happened in the past few days. Hearing that 9 Firmaments Palace's heavenly sword peak had been massacred by the 4 demon envoys, Xiao Chen's face fell. Heavenly Sword Peak had been massacred? How was that possible? Without hesitation, Xiao Chen prepared to return to 9 Firmaments Palace. Clearly, the sovereigns had expected this. Thus, one of the 4 Tao sovereigns who came to receive them was the Peak Lord of 9 Firmaments Palace. Additionally, he was acquainted with Xiao Chen. Holy Maiden Peak's Su Zhen. As for Fairy Hundred Flowers, who was still waiting for him in 5 Elements City, Xiao Chen had no time to take care of her. Originally, he had planned on bringing Fairy Hundred Flowers back to 9 Firmaments Palace to meet Qin Shuru after he was done with the Tao Palace of 5 Elements. At present, however, it would appear that that was no longer possible. Thus, he temporarily entrusted Fairy Hundred Flowers to Ouyang Roshu. After he was done with 9 Firmaments Palace, he would go to Heavenly Pill Valley to pick her up. Taking out a teleportation talisman, Su Zhen brought Xiao Chen and the disciples from 9 Firmaments Palace away. As for the others, they would naturally return to their own places. Using the teleportation talisman, they quickly returned to 9 Firmaments Palace. The first thing they did was rush towards Heavenly Sword Peak. The one they worried about the most was Qin Shuru. They headed straight for the Immaculate Residence. Although Heavenly Sword Peak had suffered a calamity, Qin Shuru continued to stay in the Immaculate Residence. Inside the Immaculate Residence, Xiao Chen saw Qin Shuru with his white hair. Ignoring the drastic change in Qin Shuru, he strode forward and pulled Qin Shuru into his embrace. He said softly, "It's good that you're fine." Although Xiao Chen had learned from Su Zhen that Qin Shuru was fine, he could only relax after confirming it with his own eyes. They hugged each other silently. After some time, Xiao Chen began worrying about the changes in Qin Shuru's body. His white hair did not ruin Qin Shuru's beauty. Instead, it accentuated Qin Shuru's cold temperament. He looked like a sacred ice lotus, one that could only be admired from afar and not profaned. At the same time, due to the gradual awakening of the ice divine constitution, Qin Shuru gave off an increasingly cold aura. With the exception of Xiao Chen, no one else could approach Qin Shuru. Qin Shuru didn't hide anything from Xiao Chen. He truthfully told Xiao Chen everything that had happened to him. When Xiao Chen heard that Qin Shuru had the ice divine constitution and that the first demon envoy had planted a mark in his body, Xiao Chen found it hard to accept. In just a few days, the changes in the heavenly star continent were simply too great. And the changes around Xiao Chen were even greater. But in any case, it was good that Qin Shuru was fine. Moreover, after the first demon envoy took away the blood demon mark, it seemed to be a good thing for Qin Shuru. In the past, when the blood demon mark was in Qin Shuru's body, it was as though a shackle had been placed on her, making it impossible for her to unleash the full potential of the ice divine constitution. Now that the blood demon mark was gone, the ice divine constitution was gradually revealing its heaven-defying abilities. Qin Shuru was fine, but Song Xian and the others weren't as lucky. Accompanied by Qin Shuru, Xiao Chen arrived at the back of the Heavenly Sword Peak. There were tens of thousands of graves there. These graves belonged to those killed by the first demon envoy that night. The cultivators from 9 Firmaments Palace had gathered here and buried them. The 3 graves at the front belonged to Song Xian, Song Long and Song Yun. Looking at the 3 graves before him, Xiao Chen's feelings were indescribable. Song Xian could be said to be Xiao Chen's mentor. Back when he was in the East Sword Pavilion, Xiao Chen was just a minor Yellow Realm cultivator. He was not even one of the 10 prided kings. As he grew, Song Xian was gradually unable to teach him anything. At the same time, he was also unable to give him much support. However, in Xiao Chen's heart, Song Xian would forever be his most respected master. Not even the Pill Cloud Sovereign could compare with Song Xian in Xiao Chen's heart. Without Song Xian, he wouldn't be where he was today. Master. Unknowingly, tears flowed down from Xiao Chen's eyes. Looking at Song Xian's grave, there were thousands of words that he wanted to say. However, it was as though something had blocked his mouth, preventing him from saying a single word. It wasn't just Song Xian. Qin Heng and Qi Yan had also fallen that night. There was also Emojia. It could be said that the first demon envoy had snatched away most of the important people by Xiao Chen's side. Looking at Qi Yan and Qin Heng buried behind Song Xian's grave, Xiao Chen couldn't help but recall the first time he went out to temper himself. At that time, although Qi Yan was very fierce to him and had even tricked him time and time again, Xiao Chen didn't know that Qi Yan had always been silently protecting him. And in the days that followed, Qi Yan had always been like an elder sister who cared about him. Even in the end, Qi Yan's strength couldn't compare to Xiao Chen's. Qi Yan still used her own methods to care for him. Many people said that Qi Yan was a Shiti. She had a violent temperament. However, only Xiao Chen knew that under that violent temperament, Qi Yan also had a gentle side. This was a gentleness that belonged solely to Qi Yan. Master, martial uncles, senior brothers, senior sisters. Xiao Chen and the people around him were suddenly separated by yin and yang. Looking at the tombstone in front of him, Xiao Chen knelt down. These were all indispensable people in his life, the people closest to him. But now they were suddenly gone. Without a word, Xiao Chen just knelt there. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 283. Xiao Chen quietly knelt before the graves of Song Xian and the others. 3 whole days passed, but Xiao Chen did not move at all. During that time, the geniuses from 9 Firmaments Palace came forward to pay their respects. At the same time, they also tried to console Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen simply ignored their words of consolation. They didn't know the position of Song Xian and the others in his heart, nor did they know the relationship between him and Song Xian. When he was at his weakest, it was Song Xian, Qi Yan, and Qin Heng who protected him as he grew up. In his heart, Xiao Chen had vowed more than once that if he had the ability in the future, he would let his master and the others live a good life. Their relationship was like that of a family. Once upon a time, they would gather together to drink and laugh. Once upon a time, Song Xian would smile at him. But now it seems so far away. So far away that even if Xiao Chen was one of the 10 great prides, even if he was willing to give up everything in exchange for their return, it was impossible. The dead could not be brought back to life. Even a Tao emperor could not bring the dead back to life. Separated by yin and yang, even ghosts and gods were powerless. To Xiao Chen, Song Xian was like a father and a grandfather. Now, Xiao Chen would no longer have the chance to repay Song Xian. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the morning of the 4th day, everyone in the Western Sea region saw that the sky seemed to be torn apart. An incomparably huge circular black hole appeared on the horizon, as if it was a black sun. Following the appearance of the circular black hole, the rulers who had been gathered in the shrines of Heavenly Stellar Mountain all stood up. One by one, they came to the shrines and stood proudly in the sky. They looked at the enormous black hole in the sky above the West Sea region with extremely ugly expressions. A spatial passageway. After a long while, the ruler of all weapons softly muttered in a hoarse voice. With the ruler's eyesight, it wasn't difficult to see that the enormous black hole was a spatial passageway. As for where the spatial passageway led to, it was obvious that it was connected to the continent where the demonic cultivators resided. They had already done everything they could, but in the end they still weren't able to stop the first demon envoy from opening the space channel. All of the rulers had ugly complexions. The formation of this space channel meant that a true calamity was about to descend upon the heavenly star continent. The bloody battle from 3,000 years ago will soon reappear, but this time, will the heavenly Chen continent be able to withstand the attack of the demonic cultivators? Haha, I've succeeded. I've finally succeeded. Demonic cultivators, quickly descend and flatten the heavenly Chen continent. Below the black hole, the first demon envoy crazily raised his hands into the air. His face was filled with excitement. 3,000 years, after a full 3,000 years, they had finally opened up a spatial channel to the heavenly Chen continent. The first demon envoy was ecstatic. Outside the heavenly stellar mountain shrines, the numerous sovereigns had dignified expressions as they watched the spatial channel form. Everybody, let's do our best. No matter what the result is, we can't give up. Let's join hands and destroy the demon cultivators' army, said the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds to the rulers. The spatial channel had just formed, the army of demonic cultivators hadn't arrived yet. The rulers might have a chance to destroy it. Even though the chances were slim, they couldn't just do nothing, right? When the rulers heard the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds, they glanced at each other and nodded. Then, their silhouettes flickered and they flew towards the West Sea region. Just as the sovereigns were preparing to destroy the spatial tunnel, on the other side of the spatial tunnel was an unfamiliar continent. It was much larger than the heavenly Chen continent. If the heavenly Chen continent was compared to this place, the heavenly Chen continent would at most be a small island. It was a vast and boundless continent. This was the headquarters of the demonic cultivators, the Blood Demon Continent. At that moment, in the center of the Blood Demon Continent, there was a majestic demon palace. In front of the demon palace, there was a gigantic public square. The public square was large enough to accommodate millions of people. At that moment, more and more demonic cultivators were gathering in the public square. The number of people quickly exceeded 1 million, and it was still increasing. Black silhouettes were flying in the sky. The number of demonic cultivators on the public square kept increasing. At the same time, in the middle of the public square, there was a black hole floating in the air. It was the spatial channel to the heavenly Chen continent. Over 10 Tao Emperor Realm Devil cultivators stood side by side before the spatial passageway, and all of them revealed cold smiles as they gazed at the black hole before them. The spatial channel to the heavenly Chen continent has finally been opened? It seems like the remnants of the demonic cultivators from 3,000 years ago weren't too useless. Get ready to march. We can't fail this time. Yes, we'll go first. I'm afraid that the people on the heavenly Chen continent will destroy the spatial channel. That's good. Then we'll go first and protect the spatial channel. Over 10 Tao Emperor Realm Devil cultivators discussed coldly. As soon as they finished speaking, all of them strode forward and instantly vanished into the black hole. After the spatial channel was formed, the army of demonic cultivators started to gather. At the same time, over 10 Tao Emperor Realm demonic cultivators were getting ready to descend on the heavenly Chen continent. In the world of demonic cultivators, Tao Emperor Realm demonic cultivators were called demon emperors. At the same time, the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds and the others arrived at the spatial channel in the West Sea domain. Facing 11 rulers of the heavenly Chen continent, the first demon envoy didn't panic at all. On the contrary, he laughed maniacally. Haha, rulers of the heavenly Chen continent, so what if you appear now? The spatial channel has already been formed. Demonic cultivators will descend from time to time. The fate of the heavenly Qin continent has already been decided. Ha! He didn't fear the rulers at all. In the first demon envoy's opinion, the formation of the spatial channel meant that the fate of the heavenly Qin continent had already been decided. When the ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds heard the first demon envoy's maniacal laughter, he snorted coldly and said, "No need to talk nonsense with him. Kill him and then destroy the spatial channel." As soon as he finished speaking, the ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds attacked first. Facing the encirclement of 11 sovereigns, the first demon envoy clearly didn't have the slightest chance of victory. It was even impossible for him to escape. And because time was of the essence, the sovereigns didn't hold back. They wanted to kill the first demon envoy as soon as possible. In a short cup of tea's time, the first demon envoy had died beneath the encirclement of numerous sovereigns. Like this, the strongest demonic cultivator of the heavenly star continent had perished. But after the first demon envoy died and the sovereigns were preparing to destroy the space channel, a cold sneer suddenly echoed out from the space channel. "You want to destroy the spatial channel? Unfortunately, it's too late. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 284. You want to destroy the tunnel? Unfortunately, it's too late. Just as he killed the first demon envoy, there was a cold shout as 11 demon emperors stepped out from the space channel. Their auras were in no way weaker than the sovereigns present. As these 11 demon emperors appeared, the sovereigns' eyes flashed with unwillingness. They had already done everything they could to kill the first demon envoy in the shortest amount of time possible, but in the end they were still a step too slow. The powerhouses of the world of demonic cultivators had still arrived. One of the demon emperors took a deep breath, as if he wanted to feel the air of the Tianqian continent. He looked at the Tianqian continent disdainfully and said, "What a desolate place. The spiritual qi here is so thin. I don't know why the holy leader cares about such a place." He looked down on the Tianqian continent. The demon emperor looked at the ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds and the others. He looked at them mockingly. "You're the strongest cultivators of the Tianqian continent, right? How laughable. A world without a saint. I'll give you a chance. Submit to the blood demon continent and I'll spare your lives." He didn't take the rulers of the continent of the Nine Clouds seriously at all. Even though the rulers of the continent of the Nine Clouds were also Tao emperors, in the demon emperor's eyes, they were just a bunch of frogs at the bottom of a well who hadn't seen the world. He wanted the rulers to submit to him as soon as he opened his mouth. The ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds smiled coldly. "You're overthinking things. But I can give you a chance. Retreat now and I'll spare your lives." How could they submit to the demon cultivators? Since the battle 3,000 years ago, the Tianqian continent and the demon cultivators had been mortal enemies. Countless people had died at the hands of demon cultivators. The demon emperor smiled when he heard the ruler of the continent of the Nine Clouds. The Tao emperors of the two sides faced each other in the air. They were mortal enemies, so there was no room for reconciliation. After that, someone attacked first, and the 22 Tao emperors started fighting fiercely. "Die!" shouted the ruler of the burning skies coldly. His spear was like a fire dragon as he thrust it forward. Just like the burning sky ruler, the other rulers didn't hold back at all as they fought fiercely against the demon emperors. The fierce battle between the Tao Emperor realm experts erupted, and strands of terrifying pressure sprayed down from the horizon. At the same time, along with every single head-on collision between them, the mountains and rivers below were razed to the ground. The Devil Emperor who was fighting the Pill Cloud ruler was also at the peak of the Tao Emperor realm. As soon as they started fighting, the Pill Cloud ruler used the power of the laws. The Devil Emperor was slightly taken aback when he sensed the faint power of the laws that surrounded the Pill Cloud ruler's every move. The energy of the laws. I never expected that there would be such a figure on heavenly Churn continent. Looks like you're not far from breaking through to the Tao Emperor realm. But don't think that you're the only one who's touched upon the threshold of the laws. The demonic king was surprised that the Pill Cloud Dominator had touched upon the threshold of the laws, but that was all. The demonic king had also touched upon the laws. As soon as he finished speaking, the demonic king struck out with his palm. The same power of the laws surged. This demonic king was clearly an existence who was about to break through to the Tao Emperor realm. He was on par with the Pill Cloud Tao Sovereign. He didn't know much about true demonic cultivators. Although the first demon envoy and the others on the heavenly Chen continent called themselves demonic cultivators, perhaps because they had stayed on the heavenly Chen continent for too long, they weren't considered orthodox demonic cultivators. But now, the 11 demon emperors that the rulers were facing were from Blood Demon continent. Their strength was far from what the first demon envoy and the others could compare to. A bunch of ants. You're delusional to think that you can kill us before the army arrives. How laughable. The demon emperor who was fighting the sovereign of all weapons sneered as he fought. He could already see the ruler's goal. Clearly, they wanted to kill or repel the demon emperors before the army of demonic cultivators arrived and destroy the spatial tunnel. They understood what the rulers were thinking, but the demon emperors thought it was a joke. They were all Tao emperors. How could it be easy for them to kill each other? They fought with all their might. Actually, the rulers also knew that they couldn't defeat the demon emperors, let alone kill them. But as the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds had said, even if there was only a slight chance, they had to give it their all. Things had already developed to this point, and there was no room for them to do anything. At worst, they would have to fight like they had 3,000 years ago. As the battle continued, the expressions of the demon emperors gradually turned gloomy. In the beginning, they had thought that the rulers of the continent of the 9 clouds were just Tao emperors from a small place. How could they compete with them? But after fighting for such a long time, the demon emperors were astonished by the strength of the rulers of the 9 clouds. Each ruler's fighting strength was extraordinary, especially the ruler of the 9 clouds and the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds. They were almost on the verge of breaking through to the Tao Emperor layer. They only needed one more step to break through to the Tao Emperor layer. Then, they would soar into the sky and stand proudly above the continent of the 9 clouds. These fellows are slightly strange. A world that doesn't even have a saint was actually able to give birth to such Tao emperors, said a devil emperor softly. Don't underestimate the heavenly Churn continent. Since the holy leader cares so much about this place, there must be something special about it, said another demon emperor. The rulers didn't look down on the heavenly Churn continent anymore. However, they weren't happy at all because the rulers were facing a group of demon emperors. It was difficult for them to gain an advantage over the demon emperors. If the battle dragged on for too long, the demon cultivators' army would arrive. Then, they would have no choice but to fight with their backs against the wall. At that time, many people on the heavenly Churn continent would be sacrificed. It was simply unimaginable. However, it was certain that there would be rivers of blood and mountains of corpses because the same thing had happened 3,000 years ago. At that time, nearly 10 billion people had died on the heavenly Churn continent. The fierce battle continued. About 2 hours later, a deafening roar came from the spatial tunnel. Hearing this roar, the sovereigns' faces sank, while the demon emperors all sneered. They're here. The army of demonic cultivators is finally here. In the end, they hadn't been able to destroy the space tunnel. Now that the demon cultivators' army had arrived, they had no choice but to gather all the strength of the heavenly Churn continent to fight to the death. Although they didn't know whether they would be able to stop the demon cultivators' army in the end, they had no other choice. Let's go. They didn't continue fighting. The demon cultivators' army had arrived. If they continued fighting, the rulers would be in danger of being surrounded and killed. The most important thing now was to gather all the strength of the heavenly Churn continent and fight to the death with the demon cultivators. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 285. Now that the demonic cultivator army had arrived, it was impossible to destroy the spatial passage. There was only one way left for the heavenly Chen continent's people, and that was to fight with their backs against the wall. The rulers retreated one after another. Seeing this, the demon emperors did not stop them. Obviously, they knew that it was impossible to stop the rulers of the heavenly Chen continent. Now that the demonic cultivator army had arrived, there was no need to be hasty. They chose to retreat. At the same time, the voices of the rulers resounded throughout the West Sea domain. They ordered everyone in the West Sea domain, regardless of whether they were martial artists or civilians, to retreat immediately. The spatial passage was located in the West Sea domain. Now that the demonic cultivator army had arrived, it was impossible to protect the West Sea domain. They could only order everyone to retreat to the central divine realm and the other 4 domains. The various cities in the West Sea region were thrown into an uproar when they heard the rulers' voices. Cultivators soared into the sky one after another. At the same time, ordinary citizens rushed out of the cities in a frenzy, fleeing towards the other 4 regions. It was a mass migration. Looking at the densely packed figures below, everyone knew that only a small portion of these ordinary people would be able to leave the West Sea domain alive. After all, they did not have any cultivation and their speed was too slow. However, no matter what, many martial artists did their best to help these ordinary people escape. As for how many people could escape in the end, it was up to God's will. The rulers did not think that abandoning the West Sea domain was a sign of weakness. In fact, it was a choice. They had no other choice. If they defended the West Sea domain to the death, it would be extremely disadvantageous for the heavenly Chen continent. After all, the demonic cultivator army they faced this time was not the remnants of the heavenly Chen continent that had been hiding in the heavenly Chen continent before. Once the demonic cultivator army arrived, their first goal would be to occupy the West Sea domain and use it as a stronghold to invade the heavenly Chen continent. In order to fight against the demonic cultivator army, the rulers had to gather all the forces of the heavenly Chen continent. However, the heavenly Chen continent had so many forces that it was impossible to do so in a short time. Therefore, before gathering all the forces of the heavenly Chen continent, they could not fight the demonic cultivator army head-on. If they chose to defend the West Sea domain to the death, everyone in the West Sea domain would be annihilated. Fighting the demonic cultivator army with just the strength of the West Sea domain was tantamount to throwing an egg against a rock. They needed to retreat, give up the West Sea domain, and then set up defensive lines in the central divine region and the other 3 divine regions to stop the demonic cultivators. This was the best choice. All the people from the West Sea region fled to the other 4 regions. At the same time, rows of demonic cultivators in black armor strode out of the space tunnel. At a glance, this army of demonic cultivators numbered no less than 1,000,000. However, this was only the vanguard of the demonic cultivators. There would be more demonic cultivators descending on the heavenly Chen continent. Led by several Tao masters, the army quickly set up camp around the space passage after they arrived. Greetings, demon emperors. Several super experts of the Tao Master realm stood respectfully in front of the demon emperors. How long will it take for the reinforcements to arrive? One of the demon emperors asked as he looked at one of the Tao Masters. Demon Emperor, the reinforcements will arrive in less than 5 days, a Tao Master replied. Within 5 days, the reinforcements would arrive in the heavenly Chen continent. At that time, the number of demonic cultivators would reach tens of millions. Hearing this, the demon emperors nodded. Seeing this, the Tao Master Realm expert wanted to say something but hesitated. However, after hesitating for a while, he finally spoke. Demon Emperor, Lord Holy Master is now in seclusion. It will be difficult for him to come out in a short time. Hearing that Lord Holy Master was in seclusion, the demon emperors were stunned. If that was the case, it would be difficult for him to come out in a short time. After all, at Lord Holy Master's level, it was normal for him to be in seclusion for a few years, or even a dozen years. After being stunned for a while, one of the demon emperors sneered and said, "It doesn't matter. It's just the heavenly Churn continent. There is no need for Lord Holy Master to deal with it personally. We can flatten it. Pass down my order. The army is to set out and take over one of the regions as our base." Sure enough, after the demonic cultivators arrived, they immediately began to attack the West Sea domain. There were tens of millions of demonic cultivators who would arrive in the heavenly Churn continent. Without enough bases, it would be impossible. Hearing the Devil Emperor's order, all the super experts at the Tau Master Realm answered in unison. Then, the army of demonic cultivators in black armor spread out and started to invade the West Sea domain like locusts passing by. Along the way, the demonic cultivators killed all the humans they encountered in the heavenly Churn continent, regardless of whether they were warriors or ordinary people. These demonic cultivators were completely inhumane. They didn't even spare the infants. They couldn't stop the demonic cultivators' attack at all. During this period, although the rulers led the warriors of the West Sea domain to stop the demonic cultivators, they couldn't protect everyone. Although some people were saved, most of them were mercilessly slaughtered by the demonic cultivators in the end. In the end, less than 40% of the ordinary people of the West Sea domain managed to escape. The remaining 60% all died. For a time, the West Sea domain seemed to have turned into a purgatory on Earth. The dense smell of blood seemed to have dyed the sky red. The casualties were disastrous. This was the embodiment of the demonic cultivators' brutality. Following the massacre, the cities of the West Sea domain were captured one after another. While the demonic cultivators were wantonly invading the West Sea domain, the rulers who successfully protected a small number of people from the West Sea domain returned to Heavenly Stellar Mountain. This was the center of the Heavenly Churn continent. On this day, a bell suddenly rang from Heavenly Stellar Mountain. The sound of the bell was deep and loud, as if it could shake people's souls. Hearing the sound of the bell, many experts of the Heavenly Churn continent said solemnly, "Heavenly Stellar Bell." The Heavenly Stellar Bell was said to have been left behind since ancient times. It would only ring when something big happened in the Heavenly Churn continent. It was said that the bell already had a weapon spirit. It would only ring when it sensed danger. In other words, once the Heavenly Stellar Bell was rung, it meant that the Heavenly Churn continent was in danger. The bell was used as a signal to warn all living things in the Heavenly Churn continent. According to records, the Heavenly Stellar Bell had a maximum of 9 rings. Once the Heavenly Stellar Bell rang 9 times, it meant that the Heavenly Churn continent was on the brink of destruction. 1 ring, 2 rings. The sound of the bell lasted for a long time, hammering everyone's hearts. Finally, the 9th ring was heard. The Heavenly Stellar Bell had rung 9 times. For a moment, everyone in the Heavenly Churn continent was stunned. Had the situation really reached this critical point? The Heavenly Stellar Bell had actually rung 9 times. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 286. The Heavenly Stellar Bell chimed 9 times. This was something that had never happened before. When they heard the 9 chimes, everyone realized the severity of the situation. It meant that the Heavenly Stellar continent was at the brink of destruction. When the Heavenly Stellar Bell chimed 9 times, the sovereigns stood in the shrines of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. In front of them was an illusory figure that emitted a faint golden light. The figure's face couldn't be seen clearly. From afar, it looked like a ball of golden light. However, at this moment, the ball of golden light said in a hoarse voice, "The Heavenly Stellar continent is in danger. Heavenly Elder, why did you chime the bell 9 times? Is the situation really that serious?" The Heavenly Pill Deity asked with a grave expression upon hearing the golden orb's words. The ball of golden light was the spirit of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. The sovereigns all called him Heavenly Elder. Other than the sovereigns, No one else knew that the Heavenly Stellar Mountain was a supreme divine artifact. Heavenly Elder was the artifact spirit of this supreme divine artifact. He had existed for countless years, as if he had always been there since the Heavenly Stellar Continent appeared. It was because of Heavenly Elder's existence that the Heavenly Stellar Mountain had always been the divine mountain of the Heavenly Stellar Continent. Only those who had reached the Tao Emperor realm could climb the mountain. This was also because of Heavenly Elder. If Heavenly Elder didn't agree, even a Tao Emperor realm expert wouldn't be able to take a single step into the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. They were very respectful to Heavenly Elder. When he saw the grave expressions of the sovereigns, Heavenly Elder sighed and said, "The situation is worse than you think. 3,000 years ago, the Heavenly Stellar Continent was able to stop the demonic cultivators because there were still saints in the Heavenly Stellar Continent. Now, does the Heavenly Stellar Continent still have saints? Without saints, what can we use to stop the demonic cultivators?" Those who were above the Tao Emperor realm were called saints. Saints stood proudly in the 9 heavens and stood above all living things. They were the chosen ones and were extraordinary. Of course, saints were just a general term. However, there was no doubt that as long as one broke through the Tao Emperor realm and became a saint, there would be an insurmountable gap. In the battle 3,000 years ago, the Heavenly Chen Continent still had a saint. It was because of the saint that the Heavenly Chen Continent was able to defeat the demonic cultivator army. However, the Heavenly Chen Continent also paid a heavy price for this, and that was the fall of their only saint. Furthermore, to this day, the Heavenly Chen Continent did not have another saint. How could a saint resist a demonic cultivator? Hearing Sky Elder's words, the sovereign's expressions grew increasingly unsightly. However, in the end, it was Sky Elder who spoke. "Let's do our best and leave the rest to fate. We can only fight to the death against the demonic cultivators. There is no other choice. Unless the Heavenly Chen Continent is destroyed, the demonic cultivators will not stop. If the demonic cultivator saints really come, I can hold them off." The biggest problem of the Heavenly Chen Continent was not having a saint, but Sky Elder took the initiative to say that he could stop the Devil Saint. Hearing this, the sovereigns silently nodded their heads. This was the only way. As for surrendering, it was not even worth thinking about because there would only be one result, and that was the extermination of the entire Heavenly Chen Continent. Therefore, they could only fight to have a chance of survival. With his hands behind his back, Sky Elder slowly floated out of the palace. Floating at the peak of the Heavenly Chen Mountain, Sky Elder looked towards the west where the demonic chi was surging. It had been many years since Sky Elder stood proudly at the peak of the Heavenly Chen Mountain, silently protecting the Heavenly Chen Continent. Now, the Heavenly Chen Continent was facing a life and death crisis. Even if Sky Elder was only an artifact spirit, he was still duty-bound to protect the Heavenly Chen Continent. Everyone thought that the strongest experts of the Heavenly Chen Continent were the sovereigns. However, they did not know that above the sovereigns, there was an ancient artifact spirit that had lived for countless years. Although it was only an artifact spirit, Sky Elder was already comparable to a saint. Sighing softly, Sky Elder thought to himself, "Will there really only be one saint on the side of the demonic cultivators? It's really dangerous." While thinking, Sky Elder's hoarse voice rang out, "Quickly gather the strength of the Heavenly Chen Continent. If a saint descends, I will stop them." With that, Sky Elder slowly dissipated in the air. Then, the sovereigns issued the sovereign heavenly order, ordering all forces with Tao sovereigns on the Heavenly Chen Continent to immediately rush to the Heavenly Chen Mountain. There were many forces on the Heavenly Chen Continent. Now that they were facing such a powerful enemy, they naturally had to gather the strength of all the forces. Only by gathering the forces together could they resist the demonic cultivators' army. Following the sovereign's order, all forces with Tao sovereigns on the Heavenly Chen Continent rushed to the Heavenly Chen Mountain. At the same time, in Nine Cloud Palace, Shaochen, who had been kneeling in front of Song Xian's grave for 3 days and 3 nights, finally got up. He took a deep look at Song Xian and the others' tombstones before turning to leave. "Husband, are you going to the heavenly Qin mountain?" Qin Shuru asked softly as she followed beside Shao Qin. The sovereigns had also mentioned the 10 prided kings when they issued the order. Now, the 10 prided kings were also going to the heavenly Qin mountain. Hearing Qin Shuru's words, Shao Qin nodded slightly. With a great calamity upon them, Shao Qin naturally couldn't stay out of it. As a member of the heavenly Qin continent, he naturally couldn't avoid the ferocious assault of the demonic cultivator's army. Qin Shuru didn't say anything after hearing Shao Qin's words. However, she wanted to accompany Shao Qin, but was rejected by Shao Qin, telling her to stay in 9 Cloud Palace and wait for him. After that, Shao Qin followed the Peak Masters and left 9 Cloud Palace, rushing to the heavenly Qin mountain. Shao Qin set off. At almost the same time, the other prided kings also rushed to the heavenly Qin mountain. While everyone was rushing to the heavenly Qin mountain, the sovereigns on the heavenly Qin mountain, including the Skyburn ruler and the heavenly Fate ruler, personally headed to the Yao Beast Empire. In the face of the demonic cultivator's army, the Yao Beast Empire couldn't just stand by and watch. Moreover, the Yao Beast Empire had 3 Beast Emperors. They were definitely a force to be reckoned with. They mobilized the entire heavenly Qin continent's power just to fight the demonic cultivators to the death. While the experts were rushing to the heavenly Qin mountain, the other low-level and mid-level cultivators weren't idling around either. Under the sovereign's orders, over 10 million cultivators began to gather around the West Sea domain. This was where the great battle would take place. All the elders and disciples of the 7 great overlords rushed to the front lines, waiting for the heavenly Qin mountain's orders to come. At the same time, all the cities in the West Sea domain were now under the control of the demonic cultivators. This place had become their base. They were only waiting for the reinforcements to arrive. Then, they could launch an invasion of the heavenly Qin continent. Both sides were making their final preparations. Experts from both sides were constantly gathering at the front lines. They were only waiting for the Tao emperors from both sides to give the order. Then, an earth-shattering war would be ignited in an instant. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 287. One day later, many light mirrors appeared in the various cities and military camps of the heavenly Qin continent. The images in the light mirrors were of the heavenly Qin mountain. The sovereigns wanted to broadcast the entire meeting of the various forces of the heavenly Qin continent so that everyone on the heavenly Qin continent could see the entire meeting. Of course, this was also to let all the warriors on the heavenly Qin continent understand the seriousness of the matter. It would allow everyone to unite and resist the demonic cultivator army together. Everyone in the Central Divine Realm, Dongyang Domain, Nanfeng Domain, and Beiyue Domain were watching the light mirrors intently. Under everyone's gaze, super experts of the Tao Master Realm appeared one after another at the foot of the heavenly Qin mountain. Although there were usually very few Tao Masters, at this very moment, dozens of them had appeared in just a few hours. These people were all patriarchs of various forces. Among these people, there were patriarchs of clans, dynasties, and sects. Usually, they would not appear in front of the world as they focused on pursuing martial art. Otherwise, how could there be so few Tao Masters in the vast Tianqian continent? With the appearance of these people, the foundation of the heavenly Qin continent was completely revealed to the world. Some of the younger warriors were shocked when they saw so many Tao Masters appear all of a sudden. They did not understand why there were so many Tao Masters hiding in the heavenly Qin continent. In a military camp near the West Sea domain in the Central Divine Realm, a young warrior looked at the light mirror and exclaimed, "So many Tao Masters, this is, obviously." The young man did not expect there to be so many hidden Tao Masters on the heavenly Qin continent. Faced with his shock, an older warrior next to him explained, "You can't just look at the surface of things. Other than the 7 overlords, there are many ancient forces that have been passed down for hundreds of years. Among these forces there are naturally some old farts. It's just that they usually don't come out. None of the major powers would reveal everything about themselves to the world. Every major power had their own trump cards. Not only these major powers, the 7 overlords were the same. In fact, they had even more hidden trump cards. After the appearance of the Tao Sovereign Realm old ancestors from the various forces, the Tao Sovereign Realm experts from the 7 overlords also made their appearance. It was common knowledge that there were only 8 or 9 Tao Sovereign Realm experts among the 7 overlords. For example, the 9 peak masters of 9 Firmaments Palace were all Tao Sovereign Realm expert. However, this was only on the surface, or it could be said that this was only the strength of the 7 overlords on the surface. How could the 7 overlords not have hidden their strength secretly? Just like now, the Tao masters of the 7 overlords had shown up. There were no less than 20 Tao masters in each of the overlords. 20 super experts of the Tao master realm. What kind of concept was that? It was more than twice the number. Excluding the Tao Sovereign Realm experts that were always on the surface, the hidden strength of the 7 overlords was even more powerful. This also reflected the strength of the 7 overlords. The 9 Vice Valley Masters of Heavenly Dan Valley were all Tao Sovereign Realm expert. However, the number of people present had increased to 18. The 9 Vice Sect Masters of Burning Sky Sect were all Tao Sovereign Realm expert. However, the number of people present had increased to 21. The 9 Supreme Elders of Mu family were all Tao Sovereign Realm expert. However, the number of people present had also increased to 21. The 9 Vice Pavilion Masters of Myriad Weapon Pavilion were all Tao Sovereign Realm expert. However, the number of people present had increased to 19. 9 Firmaments Palace originally only had 8 Peak Masters who were Tao Sovereign Realm expert. However, the number of people present had increased to a terrifying 28. It was 3 times more than the number of people present. Seeing the appearance of the Tao Sovereign Realm experts, the world finally understood how deep the foundation of the 7 overlords was. It was not something that could be compared to the surface. It could be said that the strength that the 7 overlords displayed on the surface was not even half of their true strength. Soon, the number of super experts at the Tao Sovereign Realm exceeded 200. Normally, it was rare to see a Tao Sovereign Realm expert, but now, more than 200 of them had gathered here. This was simply too exaggerated. If it were not for the invasion of the demonic cultivator army, many forces would not have revealed their trump cards in front of the world. It was as if a new door had been opened. Seeing the appearance of the Tao Sovereign Realm experts, the people who were watching the light mirror felt that they had lived in vain. They did not even know how many experts there were in the continent they lived in. However, even though they were surprised, the appearance of so many Tao Sovereign Realm experts had greatly reduced the fear in their hearts. They had thought that the heavenly Chun continent would not be able to put up a fight against the demonic cultivators. However, with the appearance of so many Tao Sovereign Realm experts, many people regained their confidence. They felt that the heavenly Chun continent might not necessarily lose this war. After regaining their confidence, their fighting spirit began to rise unconsciously. This was one of the objectives of the sovereigns. How could they lose their fighting spirit before the battle? Now they had revealed the true strength of the heavenly Chun continent to the world without holding anything back. They wanted to let them know that the heavenly Chun continent was not as simple as it appeared on the surface. Following the appearance of the Tao Sovereign Realm experts, the 10 prided kings also appeared. Look, it's the prided king of spear, Huang Fu Ao. The prided king of the immortal sword, Gudu Wuya. The prided king of the demonic sword, Shao Qin. As the king of prides appeared one after another, the young warriors from all over the place began to cheer. Compared to the older generation of warriors, the 10 great king of prides were obviously more worthy of their respect. Now that the 10 great King of Prides had arrived at the heavenly stellar mountain, these young warriors were naturally extremely excited. One by one, the important figures walked towards the shrines at the peak of the heavenly Chun mountain. It was also at this moment that the people from the demonic beast empire arrived. They were led by the 3 beast emperors and dozens of beast sovereign realm experts. Of course, Long Qing was also among them. The appearance of the demonic beast empire shocked the world once again. Could it be that the humans and demonic beasts had joined forces? If that was the case, wouldn't it mean that the number of Dao sovereign realm experts on the heavenly Qin continent had increased to 14? In just a short day, the power that the heavenly Qin continent had gathered had far exceeded everyone's imagination. It was also because they had witnessed such a powerful force with their own eyes that the confidence in the hearts of the people increased greatly. In the face of the impending battle, the people finally saw a glimmer of hope. With so many experts, perhaps the heavenly Qin continent might not lose. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 288. Because of the sovereign's methods, the cultivators of the heavenly Qin continent regained their confidence. At the same time, they were shocked by the hidden strength of the various great forces. The cultivators of the heavenly Qin continent weren't the only ones who were shocked by the various great forces. The demonic beasts of the demonic beast empire were the same. Seeing so many Dao sovereign realm experts suddenly appear, the group of sovereign beasts who came with the beast emperor were also shocked. One of them even looked at the lion emperor with lingering fear. "Your Majesty, Lion Emperor, how did so many experts suddenly appear in the human world?" Compared to the shock of the sovereign beasts, the 3 beast emperors didn't change their expressions at all. The lion emperor smiled and said indifferently, "What an idiot. Do you really think that the strength of the human world is only what it seems on the surface? If that's really the case, why would the demonic beast empire hide in the all-beast mountain range? We could just fight our way out." The 3 beast emperors seemed to have known that the human world had many hidden experts. It was also because of this that the demonic beast empire had been hiding in the all-beast mountain range for hundreds of years. It was because the human world's hidden strength was too terrifying that the 3 beast emperors had no choice but to compromise. Otherwise, just based on the strength that the human world revealed on the surface, the demonic beast empire wouldn't be afraid of a fight. Although the Dao sovereign realm experts had all appeared, the heavenly Qin continent didn't hide the Dao sovereign realm experts at all. After all, how could the Dao sovereign realm be so easy to break through? It was reasonable that there were no Dao sovereign realm experts hiding. Following the appearance of many experts, the people in the shrines of the heavenly Qin mountain took their seats one after another. The originally empty shrines were bustling with noise on this day. The entire hall was filled with tables and chairs. Among them, there were 2 high platforms at the front. There were 14 golden chairs on the first level of the platform, and they belonged to the 14 great figures at the Dao Emperor realm. Below them were 11 silver chairs that belonged to the 10 great geniuses and Long Qing. As the little princess of the demon beast empire, Long Qing naturally had the qualifications to sit with the 10 proud monarchs. Moreover, Long Qing was Xiao Chen's second sister. Feng Lingye had once experienced Long Qing's strength in Changle City, so the 10 proud monarchs didn't have any objections to Long Qing sitting on the same level as them. Not to mention, now was clearly not the time for internal strife. The devil cultivators were already eyeing them covetously from the side. If they were to engage in internal strife over such a meaningless and trivial matter at this moment, then they would simply be stupid to the extreme. Below the 2-story high platform, there were hundreds of seats arranged in order. These were the seats for the super experts of the Dao sovereign realm. Only the super experts of the Dao sovereign realm could participate in this conference of shrines. Experts of the Dao King realm were not qualified at all. All the super experts of the Dao sovereign realm entered the shrines successively and took their seat. At the same time, They displayed a friendly side to the exalted beasts that had come from the demon beast empire. Even though the humans and demon beasts were usually in a state of hostility, and even though large-scale conflicts rarely erupted, some small conflicts were common. Yet now, when facing the army of devil cultivators, all of them had clearly put aside their prejudices and enmity of the past and were united against the enemy. Those who were familiar with each other greeted each other and chatted in low voices. At the same time, Shao Chun and the other 10 great geniuses arrived at the second level of the platform and sat down. As soon as they sat down, Shao Chun heard Long Qing's voice. "Little brother." Long Qing directly sat down on the chair beside Shao Chun as she spoke. Long Qing wasn't surprised to see Shao Chun, and he just asked, "Is there any news of Big Brother? Didn't you forget to tell me something?" When faced with Shao Chun's question, Long Qing grabbed Shao Chun's ear and spoke with a bright smile on her face. Second sister." He helplessly called her second sister. Hearing this, Long Qing let go of Shao Chun with a satisfied look on her face. She then said worriedly, "No. This guy seems to have disappeared. There's no news of him at all." There was still no news of Chun-Ling. Since their last parting, Chun-Ling seemed to have vanished into thin air. Now that the army of devil cultivators had arrived, Shao Chun and Long Qing were really worried about Chun-Ling's safety. If he happened to be in the West Sea domain, wouldn't that be terrible? Although they were worried, Shao Chun soon noticed that Long Qing had actually broken through to the limit of a 4th-level demon beast, which was equivalent to the cultivation of a human at the celestial being realm. Wasn't this speed too fast? After all, Shao Chun had broken through to the celestial being realm because of the 5 elemental Tao Palace. If it wasn't for the 5 elemental Tao Palace, not to mention reaching the celestial being realm, he might not even have been able to break through to the celestial being realm. He had the 5 elemental Tao Palace, but Long Qing didn't. She actually didn't fall behind him. A wisp of surprise and bewilderment flashed through his eyes. However, when he thought of Long Qing's identity, Shao Chun quickly understood. She had the bloodline of a true dragon, so it made sense for her to have such a speed of growth. After all, a true dragon was a legendary divine beast. As he chatted with Long Qing, the rulers and the 3 beast emperors appeared at the same time. Along with the appearance of the various Tao emperors, everyone in the shrines quickly quieted down. Their gazes swept across everyone present. The rulers didn't waste any time and immediately went straight to the point. There was only a single objective for gathering everyone in the shrines this time, and it was to unite all the forces of the heavenly Chen continent to resist the devil cultivators. They proposed that all the forces including the demon beast empire form an alliance to resist the devil cultivators' army. Naturally, no one objected to this, and the alliance was successfully formed. Since they'd already formed an alliance, then they naturally needed someone to lead them. Such a mission had undoubtedly fallen onto the shoulders of the overlords and the 3 beast emperors. After all, they were Tao Emperor realm experts, so who else could lead them besides them? With just a few simple words, the alliance was unanimously approved. Of course, the rulers were still in charge of leading the human experts, and the 3 beast emperors were still in charge of leading the demon beasts of the demon beast empire. After all, if the human rulers were to lead the demon beasts, then they would obviously be unable to convince the demon beast. Conversely, if the beast emperors were to lead the human experts, then it would be the same. So, this point was clearly separated. After the alliance was formed, the rulers named it the Heavenly Chen Alliance in the end. In this way, the various forces of the heavenly Chen continent had finally converged into an unprecedentedly colossus under the invasion of foreign enemies, and this colossus was the Heavenly Chen Alliance. Within the alliance, there were 14 Tao emperors, 283 Tao Exalt realm experts, and over 1,000 Tao King realm experts. As for the Tao Transformation realm and Tao Gate realm cultivators below them, there were over 10,000 of them. After gathering all the forces of the Heavenly Chun continent, the Heavenly Chun Alliance finally possessed the qualifications to fight the Devil Cultivator's army. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 289. When the news of the establishment of the Heavenly Stellar Alliance spread from the shrines of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain, all the forces on the continent cheered. This was a powerful alliance that gathered all the forces of the Heavenly Stellar continent. At the same time, the establishment of the Heavenly Stellar Alliance meant that the war was getting closer. After the alliance was established, the rulers and the three beast emperors immediately deployed their forces. Orders were sent out from the shrines of the Heavenly Stellar Mountain. After receiving these orders, all the forces of the Heavenly Stellar continent and the countless demonic beasts of the Beast Empire rushed to the West Sea domain. The Central Divine Realm, the Eastern Sun domain, the Southern Wind domain, and the Northern Peak domain intersected with the West Sea domain. At this moment, human cultivators and demonic beasts were constantly gathering. With the gathering of cultivators and demonic beasts, the 4 lines of defense against the demonic cultivator army were gradually built. According to the rulers, the Heavenly Stellar continent must stop the demonic cultivator army within the West Sea domain. They could not let the demonic cultivator army step into the other 4 domains. Otherwise, the losses would be immeasurable. To stop the demonic cultivator army within the West Sea domain meant that the battlefield was set at the intersection between the West Sea domain and the other 4 domains. At this moment, all the forces of the Heavenly Stellar continent had gathered at the 4 lines of defense, especially at the intersection between the Central Divine Realm and the West Sea domain. As the core of the Heavenly Stellar continent, the intersection between the Central Divine Realm and the West Sea domain was of utmost importance. Whether it was the Heavenly Stellar continent or the demonic cultivator army, they would definitely use this place as the main battlefield. This was because once the Heavenly Stellar continent fell, the balance of the war would be tilted. Due to the importance of the Central Divine Realm, the rulers had gathered an army of tens of millions at the intersection between the Central Divine Realm and the West Sea domain. Under the rulers' orders, the entire Heavenly Stellar continent seemed to have transformed into a huge war machine that was operating at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, in addition to the ordinary cultivators and demonic beasts, many Tao sovereigns and beast sovereigns of the Beast Empire also set out to the 4 lines of defense. They were the strongest group of experts beneath the Tao Emperor realm, and they could be said to be the backbone of the entire battle. So, they played a role that couldn't be overlooked in the direction of the battle. To put it bluntly, the presence of Tao Emperor realm experts was actually more of a deterrent to the entire battle. After all, it was extremely difficult to kill Tao Emperors, and the main mission of the Tao Emperors from both sides was to keep the Tao Emperors of the other side busy. Of course, unless this balance was broken and the Tao Emperor of one side occupied an absolute advantage, then the direction of the battle would be determined. Everyone was ready for battle. The ordinary people who lived at the border between the 4 regions and the West Sea domain had already evacuated. At this time, there were only a large number of warriors left at the border between the 4 regions and the West Sea domain. Every city had become a military fortress. Along with the gathering of the major forces of the Heavenly Chun continent, the various strategic resources distributed by the 7 overlords were constantly being transported to the front lines. Weapons, elixirs, talismans and other battle necessities were all being transported to the 4 major defensive lines. In the face of this battle that concerned the survival of the entire Heavenly Chun continent, the 7 overlords obviously didn't hold back. For a time, the heavy atmosphere of the impending battle pressed down on everyone's heart. At the same time, in a city called Western Zhou City in the West Sea domain, it had already become the main camp of the demonic cultivators. Over 10 demon emperors gathered in the central hall of Western Zhou City. In the past few days, the Heavenly Chun continent had been preparing for the upcoming battle. The demonic cultivators naturally wouldn't be idle either. In just a few days, the demonic cultivator's army had already reached the heavenly Chen continent through the spatial tunnel. Moreover, there were still demonic cultivators gathering on the blood demon continent on the other side of the spatial tunnel, preparing to descend on the heavenly Chen continent. As the demonic cultivator's army continued to descend, the original 11 demon emperors had increased to 14. Another 3 demon emperors had arrived on the heavenly Chen continent. At this moment, the 14 demon emperors were sitting in a circle. One of them said coldly, "It's about time. Let's do it." With over 10 million demonic cultivators gathering, it was time to launch an attack on the heavenly Chen continent. Hearing the demon emperor's words, the other demon emperors didn't object. For the demon emperors, the heavenly Chen continent was just a small place. With the demon emperor's decision, the war seemed to be about to break out in advance. On the same night, the 4 great lines of defense attracted the demonic cultivator's army for the first time. The sky had just lit up and was still a little gray. However, the earth-shattering sound of war drums could be heard. Along with the rumbling of war drums, a black mass of demonic cultivators in black armor could be seen advancing towards the 4 great lines of defense. No one expected the demonic cultivators to be so fast. However, the heavenly Chen continent reacted immediately. The heavenly Chen continent's army at the 4 great lines of defense prepared their camp. Dao Masters, Dao Kings, Beast Masters, and Beast Kings flew out. Along with earth-shattering battle cries, the 2 armies engaged in a fierce battle. At the same time, they launched an attack on the 4 great lines of defense. However, the demonic cultivator's main focus was on the divine central territory, where the heavenly Chen continent's army was the largest. At the same time, the demonic cultivator's army was also the largest. Moreover, the 14 demon emperors had all gathered on the battlefield in the divine central territory. When the 14 demon emperors appeared, the rulers and the 3 beast emperors naturally appeared in the sky at the same time. The 2 armies faced each other in the sky. The Dao emperors of both sides stood in the sky. When they saw that the number of demon emperors on the demonic cultivator's side had increased to 14, the rulers' expressions became grave. "I'll give you one last chance. Submit to the blood demon continent and I'll spare your lives," shouted one of the demon emperors coldly while looking at the rulers and the 3 beast emperors. When the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds heard that, he smiled coldly and said, "Cut the crap. If you want to fight, let's fight." As soon as he finished speaking, terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations erupted from the rulers' bodies. When the demon emperors saw that, their faces fell and they shouted coldly, "You don't know what's good for you. Kill." Their battle cries shook the sky. Following that, the Dao emperors immediately started fighting fiercely. At the same time, the demonic cultivator's army also attacked the divine central territory's defensive line. In the face of the demonic cultivator's attack, the heavenly Chen continent's army also charged forward under the leadership of over 100 Dao emperors. The 2 armies immediately started fighting fiercely. This was the first battle between the heavenly Chen continent and the demonic cultivators. The scale of the battle was unprecedentedly huge. Tens of millions of cultivators and demonic beasts were fighting fiercely. All kinds of terrifying aftershocks of the battle raged on the battlefield. At this moment, human lives became the cheapest thing. Every second, someone would die. Battle cries filled the entire space. Chapter 290. Tens of millions of people from both sides fought fiercely. For a time, battle cries resounded through the sky. All sorts of shockwaves from the battle raged wildly. Just a single shockwave from the battle was enough to take the lives of the weaker Mysterious Origin Realm and Earth Mirror Realm cultivators. In such a great battle, human lives were as cheap as ants. They became the most worthless thing in the world. At the same time that the battle at the Central Divine Region erupted, the battles at the borders of the other 3 territories and the West Sea region erupted successively as well. However, there were no Dao Emperor Realm experts on these 3 battlefields, and both sides were commanded by extraordinary experts at the Tao Exalt realm. Of course, the intensity of the battle wasn't inferior to the battle at the central divine region at all. Shocking battles erupted in all 4 battlefields at the same time. No matter where you were on the heavenly Chen continent, you could feel the terrifying shockwaves from the battle coming from the West Sea domain. Such a shocking battle seemed to cause the heavens and earth to change color. Looking at the entire battlefield, there was no sign of Shao Chen and the other prodigies. Perhaps out of protection, the rulers didn't allow the prodigies to participate. After all, with the prodigies' current cultivation and combat strength, they wouldn't be able to play a decisive role even if they participated in the battle. Moreover, it was very likely that they would die on the battlefield. The gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, the rulers wouldn't allow the prodigies to die so easily because they were the hope of the heavenly Chen continent. They would definitely become experts in the future when they grew up. The blazing spear-proud king, Huang Fueo, was unable to participate in the battle and was forced to stay in the heavenly stellar mountain. He stood at the peak of the mountain and looked at the aftershocks of the battle that continued to soar into the sky. Damn it! Why didn't you let us participate in the battle? Clearly, he was very dissatisfied with the ruler's decision. When he heard Huang Fueo's angry shout, the divine sound-proud king, Gu Mu, said indifferently, "All right, what's the use of cursing here? Can you get out?" The entire heavenly Chen mountain had been sealed by the rulers with a talisman formation. Those outside couldn't enter, and those inside couldn't leave. When he heard Gu Mu's words, Huang Fueo suddenly thought of something and hurriedly looked at Wang Lan. "Brother Lan, aren't you proficient in the Tao of Talismans? You break this talisman formation, and we'll rush to the front line to kill the enemy together." Amongst the 10 great prides, only Lan Xiao was proficient in the art of talismans. He was also the only one who knew how to construct and break talisman arrays. Lan Xiao helplessly shook his head and smiled bitterly in response to Huang Fueo's expectant gaze. "Brother Huang Fu, you think too highly of me. This talisman was personally placed by Master. I can't break it." Lan Xiao said that he couldn't crack it. After all, this talisman array was set up by the divine talisman ruler himself. Compared to his master, Lan Xiao was obviously not as good as him. If they couldn't break the talisman formation, then they wouldn't be able to leave. Hearing this, Huang Fueo began to curse in annoyance. Damn it, why can't we participate in the battle?" Huang Fueo was naturally impatient. In the face of his angry scolding, the proud kings all felt depressed. Naturally, they all wanted to go to the front lines to kill the enemy. However, they were all locked up in the heavenly stellar mountain by the rulers. They worried about the development of the battle. While the 10 great prides were anxiously paying attention to the battle, over 100 black-robed young people slowly walked out of the spatial tunnel in the heart of the West Sea region. There were both men and women among the young people, but they didn't seem to be in their 30s. They were around the same age as Shao Chen and the others. As they strode out of the spatial tunnel, a Tao King expert had clearly been waiting here for a long time. When he saw the black-robed young people, he hurriedly bowed respectfully and said to the 12 young people in the lead, "Greetings, direct disciple of the demon saint." The 12 young men had a wisp of pride on their faces when this Tao King bowed. The person in the lead nodded slightly and said, "Where are the demon emperors?" They showed no respect to the Tao King expert before them at all. However, the Tao King expert didn't dare to show any displeasure and still replied respectfully. "The demon kings have already led their armies to the front lines." The first battle between the army of demonic cultivators and the heavenly stellar continent had already erupted. When they heard this, the 12 young people didn't say anything else and immediately entered Western Zhou City. From the auras of the 12 young people, one could clearly sense that their cultivations were all at the peak of the heaven realm. They had reached the peak of the heaven realm at such a young age. Moreover, Even Dao kings had to be respectful when they saw them. It was obvious that their status and talent in the world of demonic cultivators were extraordinary. The people of the heavenly stellar continent didn't know, but the demonic cultivators knew very well who these 12 young people were. They were the demon saint's disciples, and direct disciples at that. The direct disciples of the demon saint were equivalent to the 10 great prides of the heavenly stellar continent. When they arrived at the central hall of Western Zhou City, the 12 disciples of the demon saint sat together in a circle. Their expressions were extremely relaxed. One of them laughed loudly. The heavenly stellar continent is indeed a small place. Even if Master is in seclusion, the strength of the demon kings is enough to flatten the heavenly stellar continent. Third brother, don't underestimate the enemy. When I observed the aftermath of the battle at the front lines, I noticed that there are quite a number of Dao emperors on the heavenly stellar continent. Moreover, the outcome of the first battle hasn't been decided yet. Don't underestimate the enemy. The young man sitting at the head reprimanded indifferently. Third brother nodded when he heard the young man's reprimand. Big brother is right. Then let's wait and see how strong the heavenly stellar continent is. If it's too weak, then it'll be a little boring. I'd like to see if there are any monstrous geniuses on the heavenly stellar continent. Another young man said as soon as third brother finished speaking. That's right. I wonder if there's anyone among the younger generation on the heavenly stellar continent that can pique our interest. If they're too weak, then it'll be meaningless. The 12 disciples of the demon saint came to the heavenly stellar continent to challenge the younger generation on the heavenly stellar continent. When they heard that the spatial tunnel connecting the heavenly stellar continent had been opened, the 12 of them hurried over. They wanted to see if there was anyone among the younger generation that could catch their attention on this unfamiliar continent. Just like the 10 great prides, the 12 of them were unrivaled in the world of demonic cultivators. They were invincible among their peers. They never took the older generation experts seriously. In their eyes, only the monstrous geniuses could pique their interest. Now they were looking forward to seeing if there was anyone among the younger generation on the heavenly stellar continent who could compete with them. Chapter 291. They were looking forward to seeing if there was anyone in the younger generation of the heavenly Chen continent that could attract their attention. As the direct disciples of the demon saint, the 12 of them were on a completely different level compared to the other prodigies. However, when they heard this, one of the girls said coldly, "You want to meet someone who can compete with us in this tiny place? What a joke!" It was not hard to tell from the girl's words that she did not think there was anyone in the younger generation of the heavenly Churn continent who could compete with them. Hearing the young girl's words, the rest of the people revealed a self-deprecating smile, as if they agreed with the young girl's words. Yes, the heavenly Churn continent was just a small piece of land. Compared to the blood demon continent, it could only be considered a small piece of land. How could a place like this have an existence that could contend against them? Even if there was, it would be at most 1 or 2 people. It was impossible for there to be 12 people who could compete with them. Moreover, the 12 of them were all direct disciples of the demon saint. In terms of relationship, they were brothers. Naturally, there would be differences in strength between them. Even if there was a monstrous genius in the heavenly Chen continent, he would at most be able to compete with the weakest of them. It was impossible for him to challenge the eldest senior brother and the others. Among the 12 of them, the strongest was naturally the eldest senior brother, Hao Tian. He was the young man sitting at the head of the table. Hao Tian had been very calm since the beginning. He did not show any contempt for the heavenly Chen continent, but it was also as if he did not put them in his eyes. As the person who had followed his master the longest, Hao Tian's strength was undoubtedly the strongest among the senior brothers. Below Hao Tian was the second senior brother, Mo Xie, whose strength was second only to Hao Tian. The others were ranked according to their strength. They were the third senior brother, Luo Yishang, the fourth senior brother, Di Lian, the fifth senior brother, Su Yesher, the sixth senior brother, Yi Xingchen, the seventh junior brother, Yi Tianlin, the eighth junior brother, Mo Fan, the ninth junior sister, Gu Changel, the 10th junior brother, Ming Che, the 11th junior sister, Xing Han, and the youngest junior sister, Eugene. No one felt that there was anyone in the heavenly Chen continent that could compete with them. While everyone was chatting and waiting for the results of the first battle in western Zhou City, the battles in the 4 battlefields were gradually reaching their climax. It was unknown how many people had been sacrificed in this war. This war was the first time the demonic cultivator army and the heavenly Chen continent came into contact. Both sides could be said to be giving their all. If they could defeat the other side in the first battle, it would be a huge boost to their morale. At the same time, they could also severely damage the other side's morale. Therefore, the importance of the first battle was self-evident. Because they knew the importance of the first battle, both sides could be said to have brought out their full strength for this battle. The battle became more and more tragic. Even the super experts of the Dao King realm and the Dao Sovereign Realm had been killed or injured. The Dao Sovereign Realm experts, who were usually second only to the Dao Emperor Realm, had also been killed or injured in such a large-scale battle. Rivers of blood flowed on the battlefield, and mountains of corpses were piled up. The battle had been fierce for almost a day and a night. The demon emperors and sovereigns in the sky were all injured to varying degrees. However, after becoming Dao emperors, their vitality far surpassed that of Dao sovereigns. Therefore, it was still very difficult to kill Dao emperors. As the 2 strongest people in the heavenly Chen continent, the sovereign of the 9 clouds and the sovereign of the Pill Cloud continent were naturally responsible for dealing with the 2 strongest demon emperors. The battle between the 4 of them had already touched the threshold of the laws. After a day and a night of fierce fighting, no one had gained the upper hand. Obviously, they hadn't expected the sovereigns of the heavenly Chen continent to be so strong. They hadn't gained the upper hand at all. At this point in the battle, both sides were very clear that whether it was conquering the heavenly Chen continent or defeating the army of demon cultivators, it wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Because the strength of both sides was extremely close, it was impossible to determine the victor in a short period of time. Both sides wanted to defeat the other side in order to end the battle quickly. However, things didn't go as they wished. It was impossible to defeat the other side now. In this way, the battle between the heavenly Chen continent and the demon cultivators would probably evolve into a protracted battle. They understood that it was impossible for them to defeat Chen Shi in one go. Amidst the intense battle, all the Dao Emperor Realm experts had noticed the casualties on the ground below. They had already paid a heavy price. In the end, a demon emperor on the demon cultivator's side shouted coldly, "Retreat!" Following the demon emperor's order, the demon cultivator's army retreated in an orderly manner. The heavenly Chen continent didn't pursue them. It wasn't that they didn't want to pursue them, but they didn't have the strength to do so. The demon cultivator's army took the initiative to retreat. At the same time, the sovereigns and demon emperors in the sky stopped fighting one after another. The Dao emperors of both sides stood facing each other. Looking at the sovereigns of the continent of the 9 clouds, the demon emperors' expressions were extremely unsightly. Who would have thought that the heavenly Chen continent, which seemed like a tiny place, would actually be so difficult to defeat? They had paid such a heavy price, but they still hadn't defeated the heavenly Chen continent. The idea of ending the battle quickly was obviously unrealistic, so they could only prepare for a protracted battle. With a cold snort, the demon emperors turned around and left. The sovereigns also didn't pursue them. In the first round of the battle, both sides had suffered heavy losses, but everyone understood that this battle was just the beginning of the war. After this battle, the heavenly Chen continent wouldn't be peaceful anymore. Before the final victor was decided, the war wouldn't end. Nobody knew how long this war would last. He ordered everyone to start cleaning up the battlefield. Corpses were brought back to the city. Of course, the demon cultivators' corpses were directly buried. The heavenly Chen continent's cultivators' corpses were brought back to their hometowns so that their souls could return to their hometowns. In just one battle, millions of people had died on the 4 battlefields. The heavenly Chen continent's side alone had suffered over 1 million casualties. Corpses and blood instantly became the main colors of the heavenly Chen continent. This was the cruelty of war. The arrival of war represented the depreciation of life. On the battlefield, life was like a piece of paper that could be broken with a casual poke. Almost all the clans had people die. After the first battle, every household in the heavenly Chen continent hung a white cloth to bid farewell to the soldiers who had died on the battlefield. Western Pass City. This was the main city of the Central Divine Realm's battlefront. At this moment, numerous sovereigns were seated in a circle. Among them, the Burning Skies sovereign said in a serious tone, "The war 3,000 years ago lasted for 8 years. This time, who knows how long it will last? Brothers, happy Mid-Autumn Festival." Chapter 292. 3,000 years ago, the heavenly Chen continent and the demonic cultivators fought for 8 years. How long would it take this time? Based on the current situation, it would be difficult to determine the winner in a short period of time. The sovereigns looked grave. At the same time, the demon emperors who had returned to Western Zhou City saw Hao Tian and the other demon saints' personal disciples who had just arrived. Although Hao Tian and the other demon emperors were juniors and their cultivation was only in the celestial realm, the sovereigns were very polite to them because of their status. "My lords, are you ready for a protracted war?" Hao Tian asked calmly as he sat on the same level as the demon emperors. The result of the first battle was a lose-lose situation. The strength and resilience of the heavenly Chen continent had obviously exceeded the demon emperor's expectations. Therefore, it was impossible to take down the heavenly Chen continent in one go. They could only turn it into a protracted war and see who would give up first. In fact, in a war of such a scale, it was impossible to determine the winner in one go under normal circumstances unless the difference in strength was too great. Otherwise, it would take at least a few years to determine the winner. After all, a centipede dies but does not fall down. Although the heavenly Chen continent was a small place, it was not something that could be done in one go. When it turned into a protracted war, it would depend on who could not afford it first. The replenishment of warriors, the supply of resources, various elixirs, and the consumption of talisman arrays were the key factors that determined the outcome of the war. Think about it, if one side was the first to run out of elixirs, it would cause irreversible consequences for the war. Hearing Hao Tian's words, the demon emperors nodded slightly. Seeing this, Hao Tian smiled. "In that case, we brothers will help you. Now the entire battlefield is divided into 4 fronts, right?" They did not understand what Hao Tian meant. Although they were the demon saint's personal disciples, they were too young and their cultivation was not enough to influence the war. Now that Hao Tian said he would help them, the demon emperors were a little confused. They did not know what Hao Tian wanted to do, but after hearing his words, the demon emperors answered truthfully. "Yes, there are indeed 4 fronts now." Hearing this, Hao Tian chuckled softly and said, "If that's the case, then give us a battle line. Us brothers and sisters will take down a battle line for you. What do you think?" He wanted the demon emperors to open up a battle line. Hearing this, all the demon emperors were stunned. What did that mean? Hao Tian and the others wanted to attack a battle line alone? How was this possible? After all, not to mention the Central Divine Region's battle line, even the weakest battle line, the South Wind Region's battle line, was guarded by at least 10 Dao Sovereign Realm experts and over 100 Dao King Realm experts. Facing such a lineup, how could Hao Yin and the others be a match? They wouldn't even be enough to be cannon fodder. Of course, this didn't mean that Hao Tian and the others were incapable. In terms of natural talent, the demon emperors didn't dare say they were a match for Hao Tian and the others. However, natural talent and cultivation were two different things. No matter how monstrous a genius was, they needed time to grow. Without time, natural talent could only be natural talent. It was an illusory thing like a mirage. The demon emperors clearly didn't believe that Hao Tian and the others could take down a battle line by themselves. When he saw the change in their expressions, Hao Tian had expected this, so he didn't say anything. A ray of light flashed from the spatial ring in his hand, and then a dark golden talisman appeared in his hand. Along with the appearance of the talisman, a strand of faintly discernible coldness suffused the hall. At the same time, the expressions of all the demon emperors changed drastically when they saw the talisman. As an almighty figure at the Tao Emperor realm, something that was capable of causing the expressions of all the devil emperors to turn grim was obviously not an ordinary treasure. The facts were indeed so. Even though it was only a tiny talisman, it wasn't exaggerated to say that the value of this talisman was sufficient to tempt any Tao Emperor realm expert. Saint Talisman? A demon emperor stared fixedly at the talisman in Hao Tian's hand and muttered to himself unconsciously. The Saint Talisman was a talisman that could only be inscribed by a Saint-grade talisman master. There was no Saint-grade talisman master in the entire Heavenly Chen continent. Even Heavenly Lightning Genius Wanglan's master, the Divine Talisman Ruler, was only a 9th-level Heaven-grade talisman master. In order to become a Saint-grade talisman master, the most basic requirement was to become a saint. This was because inscribing a Saint Talisman master required the activation of the power of law. It was impossible to control the power of law unless one was a saint. They didn't expect Hao Tian to possess a Saint Talisman. This Saint Talisman was something that couldn't be bought with money. Moreover, Hao Tian's master wasn't a Saint Talisman master. In other words, it was very likely that Hao Tian's master had asked for this Saint Talisman from another demon saint. The price he paid for it was probably not small. However, just when the demon emperor's expressions changed drastically because of this Saint Talisman, they heard Hao Tian continue speaking. This talisman is called the Sky Sealing Talisman. Moreover, if 18 Sky Sealing Talismans are activated at the same time, it can form a sky sealing formation that can seal off an area. Moreover, my master has set up a restriction on this talisman. Once the sky sealing formation is formed, anyone over the age of 50 will be forcefully sent out of the formation and won't be able to enter. Sky Sealing Talisman, Sky Sealing Formation. When they heard Hao Tian's words, the demon emperors quickly understood what he meant. No wonder he dared to say that he could attack a battle line alone. Indeed, if the sky sealing formation was present, Hao Tian and the others would be qualified to do so. This was because once the sky sealing formation was formed, anyone over the age of 50 would be forcefully sent out of the formation. At that time, as long as the sky sealing formation was used to seal off a battle line, the experts inside would naturally be sent out. How could those under the age of 50 be compared to Hao Tian and the others? It was no exaggeration to say that the sky sealing formation was the invincible territory of Hao Tian and the others. It was an invincible territory constructed by a Saint Talisman array. As long as Hao Tian and the others were in this formation, they would be invincible. Moreover, in the face of this talisman array, no one in the Tianqian continent could break it because there was no saint in the Tianqian continent. Who would have thought that Lord Demon Saint would spend so much effort on Haotian and the others? One Saint Talisman was already precious enough, but now Haotian had 18 Saint Talismans on him. With these 18 Saint Talismans, Haotian could construct a Skylock Grand Array and seal off an area. They took a deep breath. After knowing Haotian's plan, the demon emperors had no reason to refuse. Moreover, if Haotian's skylocking formation could really take down one of the defensive lines, it would play a crucial role in the direction of the battle. It seems that all of you have no objections? In that case, give me the battle line of the South Wind region, Hao Tian said flatly as he looked at the demon emperors. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 293. Upon hearing Hao Tian's request, the demon emperors looked at each other. After a moment of silence, they nodded and said, "Okay." With the sky sealing array, Hao Tian and the others could completely lock down the Nanfeng region's battle line. Without the Nanfeng region's battle line as a burden, the demon emperors could mobilize more troops to attack the central divine region's battle line. In this way, the pressure on them would be greatly reduced. After agreeing to Hao Tian's request, the demon emperor who was the leader said, "In that case, I will order my men to call back the people who are more than 50 years old. As for the others, you will be in charge of them. I will leave the Nanfeng region's battle line to you." Since the Great Sky Lock formation was going to be used to lock down the Nanfeng domain's battlefront, those devil cultivators who were over 50 years old had to be called back. As for those who were under 50 years old, the devil emperor simply gave Hao Tian and the others full authority to command them, which could be considered as a helping hand. It was out of goodwill, but no one expected Hao Tian to shake his head and refuse. "No need. We've already brought people here. Everyone in the South Wind region should leave. I don't have the habit of commanding trash to fight." There were more than 100 demon cultivators who had followed Hao Tian and the others to the heavenly Chen continent. Hao Tian only planned to bring these people to the Nanfeng region's battle line. As for the others, they were too weak. In Hao Tian's eyes, trash would always be trash. It was useless no matter how many there were. His words were filled with disdain. Hearing this, the demon emperors' faces darkened. What did he mean? Did he say that all of them were trash? Although they were dissatisfied, they did not say anything because of Hao Tian and the others' status. Instead, they waved their hands and agreed to Hao Tian's request. "Okay, in that case, I will call back all the people from the Nanfeng region's battle line. You should also get ready. The handover will take place in 3 days. Once the Nanfeng region's army withdraws, activate the sky sealing array." "In that case, thank you very much, my lords." Hao Tian chuckled when he heard the demon emperor's words. Then, he turned around and left the hall with his brothers. After Hao Tian and the others left, one of the demon emperors snorted coldly. "Humph, they are young, but they are quite arrogant. That's enough. They are the direct disciples of the demon god. It is normal for them to be arrogant." Another demon emperor beside the demon emperor said with a wry smile. Hao Tian and the others were the true disciples of the devil saint, so it was easy to imagine how arrogant they were. After all, whether it was status or talent, they were superior to others. Moreover, after so many years, they had no rivals among their peers, so it was understandable for them to develop such a personality. After the demon emperor's battle line, Hao Tian and the others, the demon cultivators, Hao Tian and the other demon cultivators' battle line. Along the way, Hao Tian and the other senior and junior brothers chatted casually. "Eldest senior brother, do you think there's really someone in this Tiantian continent that we're interested in?" Xinghan, one of the junior sisters, asked expectantly. "Junior sister Xinghan, haven't you heard of the saying, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment? I don't think there are any monstrous geniuses in the Tiantian region." The 9th junior sister, Gu Changel, said with a smile. Hao Tian chose to set up the sky sealing array at the Nanfeng region's battle line because he wanted to help the demon cultivators win as soon as possible. But more importantly, he and the other demon cultivators wanted to meet the young geniuses of the Tiantian region. They wanted to see if the geniuses of the Tiantian region could pique their interest. Without much delay, they soon arrived at the Nanfeng region's battle line. The demon cultivators and the Tiantian region's armies faced each other from a distance. A battle could break out at any time. Either the demon cultivators' side would attack the Tiantian region's cities, or the Tiantian region's side would attack the demon cultivators' camp. The two sides fought back and forth, and the battle was fierce. However, as soon as they entered the camp of the demonic cultivators in the Nanfeng region, everyone could clearly feel that the surrounding air was filled with the thick smell of blood. Moreover, if one looked up high, one could clearly see that the entire battlefield was littered with corpses and blood had almost dyed the ground red. More than a dozen Dao masters in charge of the Nanfeng region's battle line had received the news of Hao Tian's and the others' arrival. They received them personally. Facing the crowd's reception, the fourth senior brother, Di Lian, said flatly, "Pack your things and leave quickly. Tonight we will open the sky sealing array." Obviously, he did not want to waste time talking to these people. Hearing Di Lian's words, the Dao masters' faces darkened. They immediately turned and left to arrange the evacuation. It had to be said that Hao Tian and the other senior brothers were extremely arrogant. In their eyes, it was as if all living beings were ants that were not worthy of their attention. It did not take long for the necessary preparations to be completed. In just 2 hours, the demon cultivators' army in the Nanfeng region's battle line began to retreat toward the hinterland of the West Sea domain. More than 1 million soldiers retreated in an orderly manner. Several hours later, only Hao Tian, his senior brothers, and more than 100 supreme talents were left in the Nanfeng region's battle line. The spies of the heavenly Churn continent naturally received the news of such a large-scale retreat. At this time, more than a dozen Dao masters of the heavenly Churn continent, who were in charge of the front line of the Southwind domain, were sitting together. They were very puzzled by the retreat of the demonic cultivators. Nothing had happened. Why did the demon cultivators' army retreat? Moreover, with their retreat, wouldn't the Tianshan region be able to march directly into the hinterland of the West Sea domain? What are the demon cultivators trying to do? They've all retreated. A Dao venerable said doubtfully. The inexplicable retreat of the demonic cultivator army was indeed too unimaginable. It didn't make any sense at all. They could not figure out what the demon cultivators were up to. However, just as they were puzzled, a dark golden barrier suddenly shot up into the sky from the demon cultivators' main camp. At first, it was only a light pillar connecting heaven and earth. It only covered the demon cultivators' main camp. The Tianshan region's people were even more puzzled by the sudden appearance of the dark golden light pillar. However, at this moment, the dark golden light pillar suddenly began to expand. In less than half an hour, the light pillar had enveloped the entire Nanfeng region's battle line. From afar, the dark golden light pillar looked like an inverted bowl that covered the entire Nanfeng region's battle line. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 294. The appearance of the dark golden light shield was too sudden. When it completely spread out, nearly 30 cities in the South Wind region were enveloped by it. Its area spanned across the West Sea domain and the South Wind region. In the face of the sudden appearance of the dark golden light shield, more than a dozen heavenly Churn continent Dao masters stood in the air above one of the cities. They looked at the dark golden light shield that blotted out the sky and the sun and said solemnly, This is a talisman array?" At a glance, they could tell that the dark golden light shield was a talisman array that sealed off this part of the world. As soon as the Dao master finished speaking, an irresistible force appeared and enveloped his entire body. Then, without any ability to resist, the Dao master was forcibly sent out of the Skylock Grand Formation. After the Dao master was forcibly sent out, the other Dao masters followed suit. Moreover, within the range of the Skylock Grand Formation, all the warriors of the heavenly Qin continent over the age of 50 were forcibly sent out of the Skylock Grand Formation. Figures appeared outside the Skylock Grand Formation one by one. In less than a quarter of an hour, less than 10,000 of the millions of soldiers who had gathered at the South Wind region's battlefront were left inside. The rest were forcibly sent out because they were over the age limit. People under the age of 50 were considered young in the world of warriors. Therefore, there were very few people of this age in the army of the heavenly Qin continent. Basically, they were in charge of odd jobs and logistics. It was impossible for them to go to the battlefield. After all, they were still very young and had many possibilities in the future. Moreover, most of the young warriors under the age of 50 were at the mysterious Aeon realm. There were even very few of them who had reached the Earth Mirror realm. It should be known that not all of them were supreme talents, so there was no need to send them to the battlefield unless it was absolutely necessary. Because of this, after the Skylock Grand Formation was activated and all the people over the age of 50 were forcibly sent out, there were less than 10,000 young warriors of the Heavenly Chen continent left in the Skylock Grand Formation, including Haotian and his fellow disciples, as well as the supreme talents of the demonic cultivators. Faced with this sudden change, the people of the Heavenly Chen continent were puzzled. What was going on with this talisman array? Standing outside the Skylock Grand Formation, it did not block their view. It only prevented them from entering. After several attempts, more than a dozen Tao Masters found that they could not enter the formation. At the same time, they tried to destroy it. However, the Skylock Grand Formation did not budge in the face of their attacks. What a joke! This Grand Heavenlock Formation was a Saint-grade talisman formation. Not to mention an extraordinary expert at the Tao Exalt realm, even an expert at the Tao Emperor realm would be unable to break through it. After all, it was impossible to break through a saint-grade talisman formation unless one was a saint. Through the formation, the people of the Heavenly Churn continent saw them. Their eyes, the people of the Heavenly Churn continent, of course. Through the formation, the people of the Heavenly Chun saw Haotian and the others. Heavenly formation. Could it be that they were the ones who set up the formation? The sky outside the array was filled with powerhouses from the Heavenly Chun continent. Yi Xingchen glanced at the crowd and said coldly, "A bunch of good-for-nothings. You're already so old, but you still haven't become a saint. Give me another 50 years and I'll kill you all like dogs." He did not take the experts of the Heavenly Churn continent seriously at all. In the eyes of Haotian and the others, although these people's cultivation level was higher than theirs, it was because they had lived for more than 100 years. They were trash who had not reached the saint realm after so many years. They looked down on the experts of the older generation, so Haotian and the others did not pay them any attention. They just glanced at them and looked away. Second senior brother Moxie looked at the hundreds of Heavenly Churn continent geniuses behind him and said, "Everyone, there are no more old farts in the Skylock Grand Formation. So, kill to your heart's content. Let us see what the younger generation of the Heavenly Churn continent is like." Hearing Moxie's words, the hundreds of Heavenly Churn continent geniuses shouted and rushed toward the cities of the Heavenly Churn continent. There were no longer any experts from the older generation. Seeing these sky prides charging forward, Hao Tian and the other senior and junior brothers looked at each other and smiled. Eighth junior brother Mo Fan was the first to speak. "Senior and junior brothers, I'll make a move first. Haha, it's time to kill. Ants of the Heavenly Chun continent, don't let me get bored." Following Mo Fan's words, the fifth senior, Su Yesher, laughed. Immediately after, the 12 of them moved and charged towards different cities. In the South Wind region, the Heavenly Chun continent occupied 13 cities in the West Sea region, while the Heavenly Chun continent occupied 14 cities in the South Wind region. At this moment, because of the Skylock Grand Formation, all the people above the age of 50 were forcibly sent out. As a result, there were less than 10,000 young warriors left in the 14 cities that the Heavenly Churn continent occupied. These people were basically in charge of doing odd jobs in the army. After all, their cultivation was too low and they could not fight on the battlefield. Watching Haotian and the others rushing toward the cities through the formation, the experts in the sky said in a deep voice, "What are these Heavenly Chun continent geniuses trying to do? Only 100 people, and they're so young. Could they be the ones who created this formation? But what's the purpose of creating this formation?" No one understood the purpose of Haotian and the others, But soon, a scene that made everyone's eyes turn red happened in the Skylock formation. The team of demonic cultivators, consisting of only 100 or so people, rushed into the major cities of the South Wind region like hungry wolves. In the face of these attacks, the young warriors of the heavenly Chen continent, who were still in the Skylock Grand Formation, naturally resisted with all their might. However, the gap between the two sides was too big. In just one confrontation, it turned into a one-sided massacre. This time, Hao Tian and the others led more than 100 people. They were all geniuses of the heavenly Chen continent. How could ordinary people resist such a team? Weak, too weak. Seventh junior brother Yi Tianlin shook his head and scolded in displeasure after forcibly tearing a young warrior in half. How can the younger generation of the heavenly Chen continent be so weak? They're only at the mysterious Ian realm. There aren't many of them at the Earth realm. 10th junior brother Ming Che also scolded in displeasure after killing a person with one strike. Although there were only a few people, Hao Tian and the others were crazily slaughtering the young warriors of the heavenly Chen continent. These people were originally ordinary warriors without any background and were only responsible for logistics in the army. But now they had become fish on the chopping board of Hao Tian and the others. Seeing the crazy massacre inside the formation, the experts outside the formation quickly reacted and shouted angrily, "Damn it, these guys are not ordinary demonic cultivators. They are Heaven's chosen ones, young Heaven's chosen ones. Damn it, quickly break this talisman formation. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 295. Damn it, these demonic cultivators are not ordinary people. They are heavenly talent. Break the formation, quickly. More than a dozen super experts of the Tao Master realm shouted angrily at the same time. They had vaguely realized something. Hearing the angry shouts of the Tao Masters, everyone began to attack the sky ceiling array. However, the sky ceiling array was still as solid as a rock in the face of the simultaneous attacks of millions of martial artists. There was not even a ripple in the slightest. Many experts outside were doing their best to attack. At the same time, the massacre inside the Skylock formation was still ongoing. They were simply no match for these Xioma prodigies. Moreover, these prodigies were extremely ruthless. Countless young martial artists died horribly. For a time, screams and pleas for mercy could be heard everywhere. Young warriors could be seen kneeling on the ground, begging for mercy in front of the demonic cultivators. "Let me go, let me go." In a city, a young warrior from the heavenly Chen continent was kneeling in front of a demonic cultivator and begging for mercy. Hearing this, the demonic cultivator laughed out loud. He pointed at his crotch and sneered. "Ha ha, let you go? Fine, crawl under my crotch and I'll spare your life. Crawl under my crotch and I'll spare your life." Hearing this, the young man's expression changed. Seeing this, the demonic cultivator snorted. "Hurry up, I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. If you don't crawl under my crotch in 3 breaths, then die." Clenching his teeth, the young warrior's face was completely pale. After a slight groan, the young warrior crawled under the demonic cultivator's crotch like a dog. Scared, the young warrior was really scared. Everything in front of him was like purgatory. He had never been on a battlefield, so he didn't know the horror of war. But now, he knew. Driven by fear, he gave up all his dignity and only wanted to live in this world. Seeing this young warrior crawl under his crotch, the demonic cultivator laughed out loud. "Haha, is this the strength of the heavenly Chen continent's younger generation? Ridiculous. Go to hell." Obviously, he had no intention of letting the young warrior go. Everything just now was a lie. With a punch, the demonic cultivator smashed the young warrior's head. Then, the demonic cultivator began a new round of massacre. Such a scene could be seen everywhere in the Skylock formation. These young warriors in the Skylock formation weren't demonic cultivators. They were just ordinary people. They didn't have the arrogance or backbone of a demonic cultivator. In the face of death, they were afraid because they were afraid that they would give up their dignity. Looking at the scene in the Skylock formation, the eyes of the experts in the outside world turned red. The hatred in their hearts soared to the sky. And demonic cultivators. Haotian and demonic cultivators were slaughtering young warriors of the heavenly Chen continent. Cultivators in the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent were killed. And demonic cultivators, and demonic cultivators. They hated Haotian and demonic cultivators for their actions. These young warriors knelt and begged for mercy. They didn't know that kneeling was not only a loss of their dignity, but also the dignity of the heavenly Chen continent. As a member of the heavenly Chen continent, they would rather die on the battlefield than kneel and beg for mercy in front of their enemies. The painful sounds of begging mixed with sneers passed through the Skylock formation and into the ears of the demonic cultivators. Many demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent shouted with bloodshot eyes, "You're not allowed to kneel. Get up. Get up." The Skylock formation did not obstruct vision, nor did it block sound. Therefore, the voices of the people outside the formation were clearly transmitted into the ears of the many young cultivators. Hearing the angry shouts from the sky, the demonic cultivators looked at the young warriors kneeling and begging for mercy and sneered. "How about it? Your elders don't want you to kneel." Their words were full of mockery. However, no one paid any attention to them. At this moment, they were completely engulfed by fear. "Damn it! Damn it! All of you, stand up! Shame on the heavenly Chen continent! Shame on the heavenly Chen continent! You have let down your parents and the land under your feet. Stand up!" The demonic cultivators of 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 the Skylock formation. The heavenly Chen continent was completely defeated. What they lost was not only their strength, but also their dignity. Facing the demonic cultivators of the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent, they lost everything, not even their dignity. Of course, they couldn't be blamed. After all, they were facing the demonic cultivators of the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent. They weren't demonic cultivators of the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent. They weren't even demonic cultivators of the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent. They were just ordinary people. After the massacre, Haotian and the other demonic cultivators of the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent gathered again. Their faces were filled with disappointment. They were obviously disappointed by the strength of the demonic cultivators of the heavenly Chen continent. Too weak. We really overestimated the heavenly Chen continent. Third Senior Luo Yishang said with disappointment. "Don't worry, maybe these people aren't the young geniuses of heavenly Chen continent?" said Hao Tian calmly when he heard Luo Yishang's words. Hao Tian looked at the strong cultivators outside the matrix and shouted calmly. "This array is called the Skylock array. You can enter but you can't leave. However, only those under the age of 50 can enter. If the younger generation of the heavenly Chen continent is still bloodthirsty, you can enter this array and fight with us. Of course, if there is no one in the heavenly Chen continent, we have nothing to say. However, the South Wind region will be ours." He directly issued a challenge to the heavenly Chen continent. The Heavenlock array would only lock up people over the age of 50. The younger generation could enter the array and fight with Hao Tian and the other senior brothers. Hearing this, everyone outside the formation was furious. However, since they couldn't break the formation, they could only glare angrily. Soon, the news of the South Wind region's battle spread to the rulers. The next day, the Divine Talisman ruler arrived in person. He was the strongest heavenly talisman master in the heavenly Chen continent. If he couldn't break the Heavenlock array, then there was no other way. Looking down at the Heavenlock array, the Divine Talisman ruler shook his head helplessly. He could tell at a glance that it was a holy array. Only a saint could break it. Even if all the rulers gathered their power, they still couldn't break it. Because of the appearance of the Heavenlock Array, the demonic cultivator's army that was originally at the South Wind Region's battle line was now at the Central Divine Region's battle line. As a result, the rulers had no choice but to transfer their army to the Central Divine Region's battle line. In Western Pass City, the rulers sat together in a circle. Their expressions were ugly. Facing the holy array that even the Divine Talisman ruler couldn't break, they were both helpless and angry. This damn holy array. Why don't we ask Elder Sky to help? He might be able to break it, said the savage beast ruler in a low voice as he looked at the crowd. No, Elder Sky is just a formation spirit. He's not strong enough to break it. If we ask Elder Sky to break it, what if the saints of the demonic cultivators come? We can't do that. Elder Sky is only strong enough to fight against saints, said the ruler of the continent of the 9 clouds indifferently. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.